Greetings and salutations. Welcome to Arcane Paradox. We are thrilled to present today's story, What If Gringotts' Blood Purity Test Revealed Harry as heir to 31 ancient houses and Dumbledore stole everything for 42 years. If these stories bring joy to your day, please consider liking and subscribing. Every bit of support helps us continue this passion project. Now, prepare yourself for an amazing tale. Chapter 1, Blood and Birthright. The summer heat pressed down on Privet Drive like a physical weight, shimmering above the perfectly manicured lawns and identical rooftops. Harry Potter sat on the edge of his bed, sweat beading on his forehead despite the early hour. His nightmares had woken him again, flashes of green light, Cedric's lifeless eyes, and Voldemort's cruel laughter echoing in the graveyard. 3 weeks had passed since his return from Hogwarts, 3 weeks of isolation and silence. Ron and Hermione's letters had been frustratingly vague, full of "can't say much" and "Dumbledore says it's best." Meanwhile, the Muggle news carried no hint of the darkness Harry knew was gathering. A tap at his window startled him from his thoughts. A regal-looking eagle owl hovered outside, its amber eyes fixed on Harry with unnerving intelligence. Unlike the usual post owls, this one wore an ornate silver collar bearing a symbol Harry didn't recognize, a crossed key and sword. "Hello there," Harry murmured, crossing to open the window. The owl didn't enter but extended its leg imperiously, revealing a heavy envelope of thick cream parchment sealed with dark green wax. The moment Harry's fingers touched the envelope, he felt a strange tingling sensation, almost like magic recognizing magic. The seal bore not the Hogwarts crest but the emblem of Gringotts Bank. Harry broke the seal carefully, half expecting some kind of magical protection. The parchment inside was dense with formal script, the ink seeming to shimmer slightly in the morning light. "To Lord Harry James Potter, your presence is required at Gringotts Bank for matters concerning your inheritance and accounts. Irregularities have been detected that demand your immediate attention. This matter concerns not only the Potter vaults but additional holdings of which you may be unaware. This letter serves as both notification and transportation. At precisely 10 a.m. on July 24, holding this parchment will activate a secure port key directly to Gringotts' private meeting chambers. This summons supersedes any conflicting instructions or wards. The magic binding this document recognizes only blood right and magical signature. May your gold flow and your enemies tremble, Ragnarok, director of Gringotts Bank, keeper of the sacred ledgers." Harry read the letter 3 times, his pulse quickening. Lord Harry Potter. Additional holdings. And what did they mean by irregularities? He glanced at his battered alarm clock, 9:43 a.m. 17 minutes until the port key activated. His mind raced through the implications. The Dursleys were out for the day, some garden competition in the next county, which meant no one would notice his absence. But if this was legitimate, it might answer questions about his family that he'd never had answered. Yet after the events of the Triwizard Tournament, Harry couldn't help but be suspicious. He grabbed his wand from under his pillow and tucked it into his jeans, then hastily changed into the least ragged clothes he owned. A quick glance in the mirror confirmed what he already knew: he looked exactly like what he was, a too thin teenager in oversized hand-me-downs, hardly the lord the letter addressed. At 9:58, Harry stood in the center of his room, letter clutched in his hand, heart pounding. If this was a trap. But something about the formal tone, the official seal, felt authentic in a way that dark magic rarely managed. The clock ticked over to 10 o'clock, and Harry felt the familiar hook behind his navel as the world dissolved into a blur of color and sound. He landed, stumbling but managing to stay upright, in a circular room paneled with dark wood and lit by floating orbs of gentle golden light. The ceiling arched high above, painted with constellations that actually moved, stars winking realistically against an enchanted night sky. Prompt. Good. The gravelly voice came from behind a massive desk of polished black stone. The goblin seated there didn't look up from the ledger he was examining, his long fingers tracing lines of script Harry couldn't read from where he stood. Humans are rarely punctual. I am Griphook. Harry blinked in surprise. Griphook? You helped me to my vault my first year. Now the goblin looked up, sharp eyes narrowing. You remember a goblin's name after one meeting 6 years ago? Something that might have been approval flickered across his face. Unusual. Perhaps there is hope for you yet, young Potter. Griphook set down his quill and folded his hands. You are here because magic itself has demanded it. The ancient enchantments guarding family vaults have been unsettled. Alarmed, one might say. I don't understand, Harry said, still standing awkwardly in the center of the room. My family vault is merely one of many to which you have claim, Griphook interrupted, gesturing to a high-backed chair opposite his desk. Sit. This will take time, and I've no desire to speak to your navel. Harry sat, feeling increasingly wrong-footed. The letter said something about irregularities. Indeed. Griphook's expression darkened. Irregularities spanning decades, concerning vaults belonging to bloodlines to which you are heir. But before we discuss this matter further, we must verify your identity and heritage. But you know who I am, Harry protested. The goblin's smile was cold. I know who you appear to be. But in matters of inheritance, particularly involving multiple ancient and noble houses, appearance and common knowledge are insufficient. Blood speaks truth where tongues may lie. He produced a small obsidian bowl and an ornate silver dagger from beneath the desk, placing them precisely between them. 3 drops of freely given blood. No more, no less. Harry hesitated. I'm not sure, your caution is noted and appropriate, Griphook said. But consider, would Gringotts, whose reputation and power rests entirely on our management of wizard wealth, risk that reputation with deception? The ritual I propose is the lineage revelation, standard procedure for inheritance cases and magically bound to reveal only bloodlines and connected vaults, nothing more. After a moment's thought, Harry reached for the dagger. What exactly will this show? Every bloodline to which you have legitimate claim, whether through direct descent or magical designation. It will identify which family vaults you may access and what titles you may claim. Griphook paused. It will also reveal any interferences with those claims. The implications hung in the air as Harry carefully pricked his finger and allowed 3 drops of blood to fall into the obsidian bowl. The moment the 3rd drop hit, the blood began to move, swirling and expanding until it filled the bowl with a crimson liquid that seemed too abundant to have come from 3 small drops. Griphook murmured something in gobbledygook, passing his hand over the bowl. The blood began to glow, then rose from the container in a thin stream that hung in the air between them before resolving into a complex, branching structure, like a family tree written in light and blood. Harry's name shone at the bottom, connected to James and Lily Potter. But from there, the branches multiplied exponentially, names and connections spreading outward and upward in a dizzying web. Some names glowed brighter than others, some connections appeared as solid lines while others were dotted or dashed. By the founders, Griphook whispered, his professional detachment cracking for the first time. This is unprecedented. What does it mean? Harry asked, staring at the intricate blood map hovering before them. It means, Mr. Potter, that you are heir to far more than anyone could have anticipated. The goblin traced a claw along one branch. Here, direct descent from the Potter line, of course. But the Potter line itself intersects with Peveril, and through them. His finger followed a complicated path. Gryffindor. Harry's mouth went dry. Gryffindor. As in, Godric Gryffindor, yes. A distant relation, but magic acknowledges the claim. Griphook continued tracing. Through your grandmother, connection to the Blacks. Through your mother, interesting, a distant connection to Ravenclaw, though that line was thought extinct centuries ago. But my mother was Muggle-born, Harry protested. Griphook's laugh was sharp. Magic does not appear randomly, Mr. Potter, whatever propaganda wizards choose to believe. So-called Muggle-borns are typically descendants of squib lines, magic reasserting itself after generations of dormancy. He continued following the branches, naming families Harry had never heard of: Fleamont, Shafik, Sayre, Gaunt, Burke, and more. Some connections were direct bloodlines, others represented magical inheritances from godparents, magical debts, or extinct families whose magic had designated an heir. 31, Griphook finally said, sitting back. You have legitimate claim to 31 family lines, Mr. Potter. 15 by direct blood descent, 7 through magical adoption or godparent bonds, and 9 through extinction clauses naming the closest magical relation as heir. Harry stared at the glowing web, trying to process the implications. What does this mean? Practically speaking. Practically speaking. Griphook's sharp teeth showed in what might have been a smile. It means you are potentially one of the wealthiest wizards in Britain. It means you hold voting rights in the Wizengamot that could sway the balance of power. It means ancient magic, family grimoires, properties, and artifacts fall under your control. His expression darkened. Or they should. Should. The goblin gestured, and the blood map shifted, portions of it turning from bright red to a dull, ominous black. These connections have been interfered with. Access to these vaults has been redirected, restricted, or in some cases, the contents removed entirely. By who? Harry demanded, anger rising. Voldemort? Not the self-styled Dark Lord, no. Griphook's voice was flat. These interferences bear a different magical signature, one quite familiar to Gringotts. He paused. Albus Dumbledore. The words hit Harry like a physical blow. That can't be right. Dumbledore wouldn't, the blood does not lie, Mr. Potter. Griphook gestured again, and the map condensed into a scroll that rolled itself neatly onto the desk. For 42 years, there have been withdrawals, transfers, and restrictions placed on accounts connected to your bloodlines. Most were done legally, on paper. As your magical guardian, Dumbledore had certain rights. Others. He bared his teeth. Others violated even the permissions he claimed. Harry felt sick. How much, what was taken? That, Griphook said, is why we summoned you. The full accounting would take days, but in summary, approximately 60% of the combined wealth of these families has been removed. Some of it went to Hogwarts. Some to various charities and political causes. Some, his voice hardened, to personal accounts. And no one noticed. No one stopped this. Who would notice? Who would object? The goblin's eyes narrowed. The Potter accounts were managed by Dumbledore after your parents' deaths, legally, as your guardian. The other families were mostly extinct or had no living members in a position to challenge him. The Wizengamot granted him emergency powers during the war, powers many forgot to revoke after its end. Griphook slid a thick folder across the desk. This contains the most egregious examples. Transfers from the Potter vaults to an account controlled by your Muggle relatives, monthly payments for your care. What? Harry stared at the document in disbelief. The Dursleys were paid to take me. They always said I was a burden, that they received a substantial monthly stipend, Griphook confirmed. Far more than required for the accommodations they provided. Harry's hands trembled as he flipped through the pages. Thousands of galleons, converted to Muggle currency, transferred regularly to Vernon and Petunia Dursley. Meanwhile, he'd worn Dudley's cast-offs, slept in a cupboard, and gone hungry more times than he could count. There's more, Griphook said, his voice uncharacteristically gentle. Marriage contracts negotiated but never finalized. Properties rented without proceeds returning to the estates. Family heirlooms borrowed for study. Each revelation felt like another crack in the foundation of Harry's world. Dumbledore, the man he'd trusted, looked up to, defended, had been systematically plundering his inheritance for decades. The same man who sent him back to the Dursleys each summer despite Harry's pleas. The same man who had kept so many secrets. Why? Harry finally asked, looking up from the damning documents. Why would he do this? Griphook's expression was unreadable. That is not for me to say. Goblins do not speculate on wizard motivations, we merely track the gold. Harry sat back, feeling hollow. So what happens now? Now. The goblin's smile returned, sharp and predatory. Now you decide, Lord Potter. As of this moment, with your blood freely given and your heritage confirmed, you are recognized as the legal heir to all 31 houses. Even Dumbledore cannot challenge bloodright once formally acknowledged by Gringotts. But I'm underage, in normal circumstances, yes, that would matter. But these are not normal circumstances. Griphook produced another document. This is an application for emancipation on grounds of line continuity. With this many dormant family lines depending on you as their sole heir, magical law allows for your early recognition as an adult to prevent further endangerment to ancient bloodlines. Harry stared at the document, mind racing with implications. If I sign this. If you sign this, you take control of all your vaults, properties, and political positions immediately. Dumbledore's access would be revoked. His position as your magical guardian would end. Griphook paused. You would also be recognized as an adult in the wizarding world, with all the rights and responsibilities that entails. Including use of magic outside school. The goblin nodded. The trace would be removed, yes. Harry thought of the Dursleys, of returning defenseless to their home while Voldemort hunted him. He thought of Dumbledore's vague letters and instructions to stay put. He thought of the thousands of galleons that should have made his childhood comfortable but instead had vanished into other hands. I'll sign, he said firmly, reaching for the quill Griphook offered. But I need to understand everything. All the accounts, all the properties, all the responsibilities that come with these titles. That would take weeks, Lord Potter. Then we'll start with the most important things. And call me Harry, he added impulsively. If we're going to be working together to sort out this mess, Lord Potter feels strange. Something that might have been respect flickered in Griphook's eyes. Very well. Harry. Let us begin with the Potter and Black vaults, as they are the most substantial. After signing the emancipation document, you'll need to claim each family ring to formalize your status as heir. The next hour passed in a blur of signatures and explanations. Each time Harry claimed another family line, magic flared around him, sometimes warm and welcoming, sometimes cautious and testing, as though the family magic was evaluating his worthiness. Rather than 31 separate rings, Griphook explained, the family signets would merge into a single heir ring that would change its appearance based on which family magic he was accessing. The combined wealth of your vaults, even after Dumbledore's withdrawals, stands at approximately 93 million galleons, Griphook finally said, reviewing the consolidated statements. The properties number in the dozens, from small cottages to entire magical estates. The black properties alone include 3 manors in Britain and vacation homes in France and Italy. Harry felt dizzy. From having nothing, not even clothes that fit properly, to this overwhelming abundance in the span of a morning. And Dumbledore knew about all of this. He must have. As Chief Warlock, he has access to the family registries. As your guardian, he received statements from the Potter vaults. As Headmaster, he had access to Hogwarts records showing family connections. Griphook's voice hardened. He knew, Harry. He chose not to tell you. The betrayal cut deeper than Harry could have imagined. All those years at the Dursleys, hungry, neglected, told he was a burden, when he had wealth that could have provided a comfortable home with a magical guardian. All those summers forced to return to Privet Drive, for his protection, when he owned properties undoubtedly better warded than a Muggle suburb. I want to see one of the properties today, Harry said suddenly. Somewhere safe, somewhere I could stay instead of returning to the Dursleys. Griphook consulted a ledger. The Potter family manor in Wales was destroyed during the First War, but the Black family home at Grimmauld Place in London is intact, though reports suggest it has fallen into disrepair. There's also a cottage in Godric's Hollow that belonged to your parents, though it stands as a memorial now, and, wait, Harry interrupted. Grimmauld Place. Does that have anything to do with Sirius Black? The goblin's eyes narrowed. Sirius Black is the current Lord Black, though his imprisonment complicated the inheritance. Why do you ask? Harry hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. Sirius is my godfather. He was falsely imprisoned, he's innocent. He escaped from Azkaban 2 years ago. Interesting. Griphook made a note in his ledger. That explains certain anomalies in the Black accounts. The family magic never fully recognized his removal as heir, despite ministry declarations. He looked up sharply. You're in contact with him? Yes, Harry admitted. He's in hiding. Then Grimmauld Place would indeed be an appropriate residence. As his godson and named heir, the house would recognize your right to enter even if other protections are in place. Griphook hesitated. However, I should warn you that many old pureblood homes contain dark artifacts and protections that may be challenging. I'll risk it, Harry said firmly. It has to be better than the Dursleys. But first, I want to visit my vault, my original vault. I need money, and I should see what else is there before making any decisions. Of course. Griphook stood. However, what you've visited previously was merely your trust vault, established by your parents for your school expenses. The main Potter family vault has been sealed since their deaths, accessible only by the head of house, which you now are. The journey through Gringotts tunnels was longer than any Harry had experienced before, the cart plunging deeper and taking more twisting turns than he'd thought possible. They passed vaults guarded by dragons, doors that seemed to be made of solid light rather than metal, and even what appeared to be a waterfall flowing upward against gravity. The oldest family vaults are kept in the deepest levels, Griphook explained as they descended. More protections, more privacy. When they finally stopped, it was before an enormous door carved with the Potter family crest, a shield bearing a triangular symbol that looked oddly familiar to Harry, though he couldn't place where he'd seen it before. Below the shield was a simple motto, the last enemy to be destroyed is death. Place your hand on the door, Griphook instructed. As confirmed heir, your blood and magic will be recognized. Harry pressed his palm against the cool metal. For a moment nothing happened, then he felt a sharp prick as something sampled his blood. The door glowed golden, and with a sound like distant thunder, it began to swing open. The vault beyond was cavernous, easily 20 times the size of his trust vault. Mountains of gold occupied one section, but it was the rest of the space that made Harry's breath catch. Shelves of books stretched along one wall, gleaming artifacts and jewelry displayed in glass cases lined another, while furniture, paintings, and trunks occupied the center of the room. Your family history, Griphook said quietly. Preserved for centuries, waiting for you. Harry moved forward almost reverently, drawn to a portrait hanging prominently near the entrance. A couple smiled down at him, the man with untidy black hair and glasses, the woman with flowing red hair and startlingly familiar green eyes. Unlike the portraits at Hogwarts, this one didn't move or speak, but it captured James and Lily Potter with such life and detail that Harry felt as though they might step out of the frame at any moment. Below the portrait sat a large trunk with the initials, LEP, burned into the leather. My mother's. Harry whispered, kneeling beside it. The lock opened at his touch, revealing neatly organized belongings, school books with meticulous notes in the margins, journals bound in soft leather, carefully preserved robes, and a wooden box containing photographs, wizarding and muggle alike, chronicling Lily Evans from childhood through her Hogwarts years and beyond. Harry lifted a journal with trembling hands, opening to a random page, October 15, 1979. James is driving me mad with his protective spells. Ever since the prophecy, he's been obsessed with keeping us safe. I understand his fear, I share it, but I refuse to stop living while we wait for a prophecy that might never come to pass. Some days I curse Dumbledore for telling us at all. Would ignorance be better? Perhaps. My research on ancient protection spells continues. There are references in the Black family grimoire to blood magic that might offer Harry more protection than any modern charm. Sirius wasn't happy about borrowing it, says his family's magic is too dark, but I'm not looking for dark spells, just old ones. Sometimes ancient magic is pure, untainted by modern prejudice about what's acceptable. If anything happens to us, I want Harry protected by something stronger than Dumbledore's political influence or the Ministry's orders. I want him shielded by love turned into magical intent. The entry continued, but Harry's vision had blurred with tears. His mother's handwriting, his mother's thoughts, his mother's love, preserved here all these years while he'd been told nothing about her except that he had her eyes. There's so much here, he said, looking up at Griphook. I can't possibly go through it all today. You need not remove everything at once, the goblin replied. Take what you require immediately. The rest will remain secure until you're ready. Harry nodded, carefully returning the journal to the trunk. I'll take this trunk, some gold, and... His eyes caught on something gleaming in a glass case, a delicate gold chain supporting a pendant of twisted gold surrounding a tiny hourglass. Is that a time-turner? Indeed, Griphook confirmed. A family heirloom, considerably more powerful than the ministry-regulated versions. It was commissioned by your great-grandfather Fleamont Potter. Harry approached the case cautiously. I thought time-turners were strictly controlled. By today's ministry, yes. But family heirlooms created before such regulations were grandfathered into private collections. Griphook's smile was sly. The ministry would prefer you not know that, of course. Remembering his experience with Hermione's time-turner in third year, Harry decided to leave that particular artifact for later study. Instead, he gathered a substantial amount of gold into a self-shrinking pouch Griphook provided, selected a few books that caught his eye, and carefully closed his mother's trunk. I'll come back, he promised the vault, feeling slightly foolish talking to a room but somehow certain that the family magic could hear him. I'll learn everything about you, about us. Before leaving, Harry paused before a small pedestal near the door, which held a single ring, gold with a deep red stone bearing the same triangular symbol as the door. Is this? The Potter family ring, yes, Griphook confirmed. It would normally be worn by the head of house, but as you've claimed multiple houses, it will merge with your heir ring once you put it on. Harry hesitated only briefly before slipping the ring onto his finger. It resized instantly, and he felt a rush of warm magic flow up his arm and throughout his body. For a moment, the ring glowed brightly, then settled into a comfortable weight that somehow felt like coming home. I can feel it, Harry whispered. Like recognition. Family magic, Griphook explained as they made their way back to the cart. It's been waiting for an heir to claim it. Each family ring you've claimed today has added its magic to your core, though it may take time before you notice the effects. Back in Griphook's office, Harry made final arrangements. A specialized port key was created to take him directly to Grimmauld Place, magically keyed to bypass any wards as his status as Black Heir would grant him automatic entry. What about Dumbledore? Harry asked as they concluded their business. Will he know what happened today? He will receive notification that his access to your vaults has been revoked, Griphook confirmed. As Chief Warlock, he will eventually be made aware of your emancipation, though that paperwork may take several days to process through ministry channels. So I have some time before he realizes the full extent of what's happened. Perhaps. The goblin's expression was calculating. Though I wouldn't underestimate how quickly he'll connect the dots. Harry nodded, pocketing the port key, a small silver key engraved with the Black family crest. Thank you, Griphook. For everything today. The goblin looked momentarily surprised by the gratitude. I have merely fulfilled my duties to a valued client, Lord Potter Black Peveril Gryffindor. He stopped at Harry's pained expression. Harry. Still, Harry insisted, you've given me something I've never had before, knowledge about my family, my heritage. That means more than all the gold in those vaults. Something almost like approval flickered across Griphook's face. Perhaps you will be different from other wizards after all. He hesitated, then added, a word of advice, freely given, power newly gained is often power most precariously held. Proceed with caution, especially regarding Dumbledore. He has had decades to weave his plans. I will, Harry promised, gripping his mother's trunk in one hand and the port key in the other. May your gold flow and your enemies tremble, Griphook. The goblin's eyes widened slightly at the traditional farewell. And may your vaults overflow and your magic prosper, Harry Potter. With that, Harry activated the port key, feeling the familiar hook behind his navel as Gringotts disappeared in a swirl of magic. His last thought before the world dissolved around him was that nothing would ever be the same again. He landed with a thud in a dimly lit hallway, dust swirling around him in the stale air. Grimmauld Place. Before he could take in his surroundings, a shriek split the air. Intruder! Thief! How dare you enter the noble house of Black? Harry spun around, wand drawn instinctively, to find himself facing a life-sized portrait of a severe-looking woman with familiar aristocratic features. Her painted face was contorted with rage as she continued to scream about blood traitors and mudbloods. Before Harry could respond, thundering footsteps approached, and a familiar voice bellowed, "Who the bloody hell, Harry?" Sirius Black stood frozen at the end of the hallway, wand half raised, expression shifting rapidly from battle-ready to utterly confused. What are you? He shook his head, then rushed forward, pulling Harry into a fierce hug that nearly knocked the wind from him. Never mind, tell me later. Quick, help me shut her up. Together they wrestled. Heavy curtains closed over the still screaming portrait, muffling the worst of the noise. My mother, Sirius explained with a grimace. Charming woman, as you can tell. Permanent sticking charm on the back of the canvas. He stepped back, studying Harry with worried eyes. Not that I'm not thrilled to see you, but what in Merlin's name are you doing here? How did you even find this place? It's under Fidelius. Harry held up the silver key. Gringotts' port key. Apparently, I'm your heir. Sirius's jaw dropped. My. But how would you? His eyes widened further as they fell on Harry's hand, where the heir ring gleamed. Bloody hell, is that what I think it is? We should sit down, Harry suggested, suddenly feeling the weight of the day's revelations. I have a lot to tell you. About Gringotts, about my inheritance, about. He took a deep breath. About what Dumbledore's been doing with my family's money for the last 42 years. Understanding dawned in Sirius's eyes, followed quickly by something darker, a cold fury that reminded Harry that this man had once been considered dangerous enough to lock away in Azkaban. The kitchen's this way, Sirius said quietly. I think we're going to need something stronger than tea for this conversation. Harry followed his godfather down the gloomy hallway, the heir ring warm on his finger and his mother's trunk clutched tightly in his hand. For the first time in his life, he wasn't returning to Privet Drive for the summer. For the first time, he had leverage, knowledge, and power of his own. And he intended to use them. Chapter 2, Vaults of Secrets. He did what? Sirius's roar echoed through the gloomy kitchen of Grimmauld Place, his fist coming down on the ancient wooden table hard enough to make their teacups jump. Harry had spent the last hour recounting his visit to Gringotts, showing Sirius the documents Griphook had provided, and explaining the tangled web of family connections that had been hidden from him his entire life. 42 years, Harry repeated, watching his godfather pace the length of the kitchen like a caged animal. According to Griphook, Dumbledore has been accessing vaults connected to my bloodline since before my parents were even married. Sirius ran both hands through his shaggy hair, his expression cycling between disbelief, fury, and a grim sort of vindication. I knew he was manipulative, but this is beyond anything I imagined. He stopped abruptly, turning to face Harry. The Dursleys? He was paying them. Harry nodded, bile rising in his throat at the memory of those damning financial statements. Thousands of galleons, converted to pounds. Enough to buy Dudley everything he ever wanted while I slept in a cupboard and wore his cast-offs. A muscle twitched in Sirius's jaw. I'll kill them. No, I'll do worse. I'll ruin them. Those miserable, greedy, they're not worth it, Harry interrupted, surprised by the steadiness in his own voice. They're not worth anything. What matters now is what we do next. Sirius stared at him for a long moment, something like pride mingling with the anger in his eyes. When did you get so grown up, pup? About 6 hours ago, according to Gringotts. Harry's smile was wry. Magical emancipation tends to age a person. That earned a bark of laughter from Sirius, who finally dropped back into his chair. Fair point. So, what's the plan? You must have some ideas rattling around in that newly lordly head of yours. Harry had been thinking about little else since leaving Gringotts. First, I need to understand exactly what I've inherited. Not just the gold, but the properties, the artifacts, the political positions, everything. Griphook barely scratched the surface today. Smart, Sirius nodded. Knowledge before action. Second, Harry continued, ticking points off on his fingers, I need to figure out what Dumbledore's been doing with everything he took. Some went to Hogwarts, some to charities, but Griphook said some went to personal accounts. Follow the money, Sirius murmured. Classic investigation technique. And third. Harry hesitated, his voice dropping. I need to understand why. Why hide all of this from me? Why keep me ignorant and poor when I had all of this? Sirius's expression darkened. Control, Harry. It's always about control with Albus. He probably thought you'd be more biddable if you didn't know your own worth, if you thought Hogwarts was a generous rescue rather than your birthright. The thought made Harry's stomach clench. How different would his life have been if he'd known from the beginning that he wasn't a burden, wasn't unwanted, wasn't poor? If he'd known that he had a legacy beyond the lightning scar on his forehead? A soft pop interrupted his thoughts as an ancient house elf appeared in the kitchen, muttering audibly about blood traitors and thieves, before addressing Sirius with barely disguised contempt. Master has brought the Potter boy into my mistress's house. Creature wonders what filth will follow next. Creature, Sirius growled, this is Lord Harry Potter Black, heir to the House of Black and about 30 other families, so you'd better adjust your attitude. The elf's bloodshot eyes widened as they fell on Harry's heir ring. The half-blood claims the noble House of Black. He croaked, sounding horrified. The half-blood, Harry said calmly, is recognized by family magic as rightful heir. Your mistress's portrait already tried to object, it didn't go well for her. It was a bluff, he'd done nothing to silence the portrait permanently, but the implied power seemed to make an impression on Creature, whose gnarled hands twisted anxiously in the filthy pillowcase he wore. Creature, Harry continued, softer now, this house has fallen into disrepair. As Black heir, I intend to restore it to glory, but I'll need help. Are you willing to serve the House of Black properly? Something shifted in the elf's demeanor, a straightening of his hunched shoulders, a focusing of his rheumy eyes. The young master speaks of restoring Black glory. I do. Beginning tomorrow. Creature studied him for a long moment, then bowed, not deeply, but a bow nonetheless. Creature will prepare rooms for the young master. With another pop, he vanished. Sirius stared at Harry with undisguised amazement. How did you do that? I've been fighting with that miserable creature since I arrived. I spoke to him like the heir of his house, not like someone who hates everything the house stands for, Harry pointed out gently. No offense, Sirius, but you've made it pretty clear how much you despise your family legacy. Fair point, Sirius conceded with a wince. I've never given him reason to respect me. He shook his head. But enough about my dysfunctional household. What's your next move? Harry glanced at the grandfather clock ticking solemnly in the corner. It's nearly 7. I doubt Gringotts is still open for business, but first thing tomorrow, I want to visit more of the vaults. particularly any that might contain family journals or records. Looking for answers about Dumbledore? Among other things, Harry agreed. But tonight. He hesitated. Tonight I'd like to go through my mother's trunk. It's the first real connection I've had to her besides photos. Sirius's expression softened. Of course. I'll help, if you'd like. I knew her well, I might be able to provide context for some of what you find. I'd like that, Harry said, throat suddenly tight with emotion. They relocated to the drawing room, where a fire drove away the perpetual chill of the ancient house. Harry carefully opened Lily's trunk, and together they began sorting through the contents, Sirius occasionally laughing or growing misty-eyed as particular items triggered memories. She carried this notebook everywhere 7th year, Sirius said, holding up a leather-bound journal filled with complex charm diagrams. James used to tease her about it, but she was brilliant, constantly experimenting with new spell modifications. She mentioned research in one of her later journals, Harry said, showing Sirius the entry about protection spells he'd read earlier. Something about blood magic to protect me. Sirius went very still. Bloody hell. You don't think? What? Harry, the night Voldemort came to Godric's Hollow, he killed James first, then offered to spare Lily if she'd step aside. How do you know that? Harry whispered. You told us, 3rd year, when the Dementors were affecting you. You heard their last moments. Sirius looked pained at the reminder. But the question no one could answer was why Voldemort would offer to spare her at all. He wasn't exactly known for mercy. Harry's mind raced. You think it has something to do with her research? With blood magic? I don't know. But Lily was frighteningly clever, and if she found something in the Black family grimoires. Sirius trailed off, leafing through the journal with increased urgency. There might be answers here. They continued through the trunk's contents, finding more journals, personal correspondence, and even a collection of Lily's wand experiments. She'd apparently been interested in wand lore as well as charms. Hours passed in comfortable focus, the fire burning low as they pieced together glimpses of Lily Evans Potter's brilliant mind. Near midnight, Harry uncovered a sealed envelope addressed simply, "For Harry, when he's ready." His hands trembled slightly as he broke the seal, revealing several pages of his mother's distinctive handwriting. My darling Harry, if you're reading this, then our worst fears have come to pass, and your father and I are gone. I pray that's not the case, that this letter will eventually be nothing more than an embarrassing reminder of your mother's paranoia. But these are dark days, and hope must be balanced with preparation. There's so much I want to tell you about who you are, about your heritage, about the incredible magical legacy you carry. The Potter line is ancient and noble, though your father wore his status lightly. The Blacks, the Peverils, and others flow in your veins. You are the culmination of centuries of magical history, Harry, though I hope you'll be defined by your own choices rather than your bloodlines. But I write this letter for a specific purpose. I've become concerned about Albus Dumbledore's intentions. He is a great wizard, perhaps the greatest of our age, but greatness and goodness are not always aligned. His interest in prophecy, in you specifically, troubles me. There was a prophecy made before your birth, one that Albus believes connects you to Voldemort. He guards the full contents jealously, sharing only enough to justify his suggestions about our protection. James trusts him implicitly. I wish I could say the same. I've noticed small inconsistencies, Harry. Funds missing from the Potter accounts that James dismisses as wartime donations. Family heirlooms borrowed for safekeeping that never seem to return. Suggestions that distance us from potential allies for reasons that shift like sand. Perhaps I'm being unfair. Perhaps fear has made me suspicious. But Mother's intuition is its own form of magic, and mine tells me to be wary. If something happens to us, Sirius will raise you. He's your godfather, bound by magic and love to protect you. If the worst should happen to him as well, the Longbottoms have agreed to take you in. Under no circumstances are you to be placed with my sister Petunia. She and her husband despise magic, and I fear what growing up in such an environment would do to you. I've taken precautions, Harry. Blood magic, old and powerful, that should protect you even if we're gone. Gringotts holds copies of our will and instructions for your care. The Potter Grimoire contains family spells that are your birthright. Trust your instincts. Question everything, even this letter. And know that whatever happens, whatever choices you face, you were loved, fiercely, completely, eternally loved, from the moment we knew you existed. Your loving mother, Lily P.S. If you're reading this as a child, ask Sirius about the Marauder's map. It may prove useful at Hogwarts. Harry read the letter twice, then wordlessly passed it to Sirius, whose expression grew progressively grimmer with each paragraph. She knew, Sirius finally said, voice hoarse. She suspected him even then. And she specifically said I wasn't to go to the Dursleys, Harry added, anger bubbling beneath his calm exterior. Yet Dumbledore placed me there anyway, against my parents' express wishes. The wills, Sirius said suddenly. Your parents' wills should have been executed by Gringotts. If Lily left instructions there, then Dumbledore must have interfered with those too. Harry's voice was steady despite the rage coiling inside him. Another thing to investigate tomorrow. Sirius carefully refolded the letter, handing it back with reverence. Your mother was brilliant, Harry. If she suspected Dumbledore, there was good reason. Harry nodded, tucking the letter into his pocket. We should get some sleep. Tomorrow will be a long day. As if summoned by the words, Creature appeared with a pop. The young master's room is prepared. Would master prefer breakfast at 7 or 8? The transformation in the elf's demeanor was subtle but noticeable. He stood straighter, his pillowcase was marginally cleaner, and while he still avoided looking directly at Sirius, his address to Harry bordered on respectful. 8, please, Creature. And thank you. The elf bowed and disappeared, leaving Sirius staring after him with grudging admiration. I still don't know how you did that. Respect goes both ways, Harry said simply, gathering his mother's trunk. Good night, Sirius. And, thank you. For everything. That's what godfathers are for, pup. Sirius pulled him into a brief, fierce hug. Get some rest. Tomorrow we start unraveling 42 years of Dumbledore's secrets. Morning brought a surprisingly decent breakfast courtesy of Creature, followed by preparations for another visit to Gringotts. Harry dressed in the best clothes he had, still Dudley's hand-me-downs, though he'd secretly modified them with shrinking charms after gaining his emancipation. We need to get you proper robes, Sirius observed as they prepared to leave. Can't have the heir to 31 houses looking like a scarecrow. 31.5, technically, Harry corrected. I'm only heir presumptive to the Black family until you have children of your own. Sirius barked a laugh. Not likely to happen, pup. The Black line ends with me, and continues through you. His expression sobered. I named you my heir when you were born. The fact that the Black family magic recognizes you confirms that was never changed, despite my extended holiday at the ministry's expense. They traveled to Gringotts via Portkey, Harry having arranged a return trip with Griphook the previous day. The bank was considerably busier than it had been during his private appointment, with wizards and witches of all descriptions conducting their business across the vast marble hall. Griphook met them in a private reception area, his eyes narrowing slightly at Sirius. Lord Black. The bank was unaware you would be joining Lord Potter today. I imagine there are many things the bank is unaware of, Master Griphook, Sirius replied smoothly. Including my legal status as an unconvicted wizard who never received a trial. The goblin's expression didn't change, but something like respect flickered in his dark eyes. Indeed. How illuminating. He turned to Harry. You wish to continue exploring your vaults today? Yes, Harry confirmed. Specifically, I'd like to see any vaults that might contain family records, journals, or legal documents. And I need to locate my parents' wills. Griphook's expression sharpened. Their wills? Those should have been executed immediately following their deaths. Standard procedure for all clients. Were they? Harry asked, already suspecting the answer. I will need to consult the records. Griphook led them through a different door than the previous day, into a circular room lined with filing cabinets that reached from floor to ceiling. He approached one, running a clawed finger along the drawer fronts until he found what he sought. Potter, here. The file he withdrew was considerably thinner than it should have been, given the family's wealth and status. Griphook's frown deepened as he examined the contents. This is most irregular, he finally said, looking up with an expression that could only be described as dangerously calm. According to these records, James and Lily Potter's wills were sealed by order of the Wisingamot on November 2, 1981, the day after their deaths. Who requested the sealing? Sirius asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. Chief Warlock Albus Dumbledore, Griphook confirmed, citing matters of national security and protection of the boy who lived. Convenient, Harry said bitterly. And did Gringotts just go along with this? Griphook's expression darkened further. The directive bears the signature of Director Ragnarok himself. However, he examined the document more closely. The authentication rune appears, subtly altered. This would require further investigation by our security division. You think it might be forged? Sirius asked, leaning forward. Not forged, precisely. More, magically coerced. Griphook set the document aside. This is a serious matter, Lord Potter. If the Chief Warlock used magic to influence Gringotts' procedures, it violates not only our sovereignty but the International Banking Accords of 1612. Can the wills be unsealed now that I'm emancipated? Harry asked. They can and should be, Griphook confirmed. As head of House Potter, your authority supersedes the Wisingamot order, especially if that order was improperly obtained. He made a note on a piece of parchment that promptly folded itself into an airplane and zoomed from the room. I've requested the sealed documents be retrieved from deep storage. This may take some time. While we wait, Harry said, I'd like to visit the Black family vault. If my mother was researching protection spells in black grimoires, I need to see what she found. Sirius raised an eyebrow. The main Black Vault is not a pleasant place, Harry. My family collected dark artifacts like some people collect chocolate frog cards. All the more reason to know what's there, Harry insisted. Besides, if there's something that could help me understand what happened that night in Godric's Hollow. Very well, Griphook agreed. Lord Black, as you are still the sitting head of house, will you grant Lord Potter access? Sirius nodded. Full access, as my heir and godson. The journey to the Black Vault was even more harrowing than the previous day's trip to the Potter Vault. The cart plunged deeper into the caverns beneath Gringotts, taking hairpin turns at alarming speeds before finally screeching to a halt before an imposing black door emblazoned with the Black family motto, Toujours pur. Always pure, Harry murmured, reading the French inscription. Charming. My family had many virtues, Sirius said dryly, but charm wasn't among them. Unlike the Potter Vault, which had required only Harry's blood for entry, the Black Vault demanded more complex authentication. Sirius placed his hand on the door, murmuring something in Latin that made the surface shimmer ominously. Then, gesturing for Harry to do the same, he guided Harry's air-ringed hand to a specific point on the door. Black family magic is particular, he explained. It wants to be sure you're worthy, not just related. Harry felt an unpleasant prickling sensation as the door seemed to evaluate him, magic probing at his core in a way that felt uncomfortably intimate. For a tense moment, nothing happened. Then, with a sound like breaking glass, the door dissolved, revealing a vault that could not have been more different from the Potter family's. Where the Potter Vault had been spacious and well-organized, the Black Vault was a labyrinthine collection of shelves, cabinets, and freestanding displays that seemed to shift and rearrange themselves even as they watched. Don't touch anything without checking with me first, Sirius warned, stepping cautiously inside. Some of these items are cursed to respond only to full-blooded blacks. Charming, Harry repeated, but heeded the warning. They made their way through the vault, Sirius pointing out items of interest or particular danger. Ancient weapons lined one wall, many gleaming with clearly dark enchantments. Jewelry displays held pieces that whispered enticingly as they passed. A cabinet of cursed music boxes, a collection of shrunken heads that followed their movements with glassy eyes, even what appeared to be a mummified hand mounted on a silver stand. The Black family library should be this way, Sirius said, leading them deeper into the vault. If Lily was researching family grimoires, that's where we'll find them. The library portion of the vault was dominated by a massive ebony table surrounded by high-backed chairs. Shelves stretched from floor to ceiling, packed with books bound in materials Harry preferred not to identify too closely. Here we are, Sirius said, approaching a locked cabinet displaying a single book on a velvet cushion. The primary Black family grimoire. Only accessible to those of black blood or formally recognized heirs. The book was bound in what looked disturbingly like human skin, its cover adorned with the family crest worked in silver. No title marked its spine or cover, but Harry could feel the magic emanating from it, old, powerful, and not entirely benevolent. This contains the most powerful family spells, Sirius explained, tapping the cabinet with his wand to unlock it. Blood magic, soul magic, curses, and protections developed or acquired over generations of rather single-minded magical research. And my mother studied this? Harry asked, finding it difficult to imagine his muggle-born mother poring over such an obviously dark artifact. Lily was pragmatic, Sirius said carefully. When it came to protecting you, she didn't care much about the arbitrary distinctions between light and dark magic. She cared about what worked. He lifted the grimoire from its cushion, handling it with surprising reverence for a man who claimed to despise his family legacy. If she found something in here that could protect you, she'd have used it without hesitation. Harry watched as Sirius carefully opened the book, muttering something that caused the pages to ruffle as though caught in a breeze. I'm looking for any signs that specific pages were studied recently, or as recently as 15 years ago. The pages settled on a section near the middle of the book, the parchment bearing notes in a small, neat hand that Harry recognized from his mother's journals. The text itself was in Latin, with diagrams showing complex runic arrays centered around what appeared to be a human figure. Protego sanguinem, Sirius read, his expression growing increasingly troubled. The blood shield. It's ancient magic, predating the Ministry's classifications of dark and light. According to this, it creates a protective barrier using willingly sacrificed blood that can repel even the most powerful curses. He looked up, face pale. Including the killing curse. My mother. Harry's voice faltered. She found a way to protect me from Avada Kedavra. But that's supposed to be impossible. Nothing's truly impossible in magic, Harry, just improbable or forgotten. Sirius continued reading, occasionally translating passages aloud. The spell requires the caster to mark the subject with their blood, willingly given, while establishing a magical intent of protection. Then, bloody hell. What? The protection is activated by the willing sacrifice of the caster's life for the subject. Sirius looked up, his eyes haunted. Lily didn't just die for you, Harry. She deliberately sacrificed herself, invoking ancient magic that Voldemort probably didn't even know existed. The revelation hit Harry like a physical blow. His mother hadn't simply been murdered, she had chosen to die, transformed her death into a weapon of protection. It was a sacrifice beyond anything he'd imagined, deliberate and calculated even in her final moments. Dumbledore knew, he whispered, the realization dawning with terrible clarity. He must have known what she did. That's why he kept insisting I stay with Petunia, something about my mother's protection living on through her blood. But he never explained the full truth, Sirius growled. Never told you that your mother actively chose this magic, prepared for it, made a conscious decision to die so that you could live. Because that would have led to questions about how she learned it, Harry concluded, anger building inside him. Questions about family grimoires and vaults he didn't want me to know existed. They continued searching the grimoire, finding more notes in Lily's handwriting scattered throughout the sections on protective magic. She had been thorough in her research, evaluating multiple options before settling on the blood shield as her final contingency. We should copy these sections, Harry decided. And look for anything else that might help us understand what Dumbledore's been doing all these years. There are journals as well, Sirius said, gesturing to another shelf. Black family records going back centuries. If you're looking for context on how old families interact, how magical politics work behind the scenes, there's no better resource. They spent the next hour gathering materials, carefully selected books and journals that might shed light on Harry's heritage and Dumbledore's manipulations. By the time they finished, Griphook had returned to inform them that the Potter wills had been located and unsealed. Back in Griphook's office, 2 sealed parchments waited on his desk, each bearing the Potter family crest in wax. As the primary beneficiary and head of house, you have the right to open these privately, the goblin explained. However, I must advise that formal readings should be scheduled, as there may be bequests to other parties. I understand, Harry said, reaching for his father's will first. But I need to know what they say immediately. James Potter's will was straightforward in its provisions. The bulk of the Potter estate was to pass to Harry upon reaching his majority, with substantial trust vaults established for his education and care. Lily was named his guardian, with Sirius as the secondary guardian should Lily be unable to care for him. The will explicitly stated, under no circumstances is my son to be placed with Lily's sister Petunia Desley, as she and her husband have expressed nothing but contempt for our world and would be unable to support Harry's magical development. There was also a list of alternates should both Lily and Sirius be unavailable, Alice and Frank Longbottom, Minerva McGonagall, Amelia Bones, and even the Weasley family, with whom James had apparently formed a connection through the Order of the Phoenix. Most damning was a codicil added just a week before his death. In the event of our deaths under suspicious circumstances, I name Peter Pettigrew as our secret keeper under the Fidelius charm, not Sirius Black as widely believed. This switch was suggested by Albus Dumbledore as a strategic deception. He knew, Sirius whispered, reading over Harry's shoulder. Dumbledore knew I wasn't the secret keeper. He knew I wasn't guilty. Lily's will contained similar provisions but included more detailed instructions about Harry's magical education, emphasizing exposure to both wizarding and Muggle culture. She had also left specific bequests to several friends, including Severus Snape, who was to receive her complete collection of advanced potions journals, in memory of our friendship and with hope that old wounds may eventually heal. Most significantly, she had included a sealed letter addressed to the head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, with instructions that it be delivered immediately in the event of her death. The letter itself was missing from the file. That letter could have cleared Sirius, Harry realized. If she included information about the secret keeper switch. It never reached Amelia Bones, Sirius confirmed grimly. Barty Crouch was head of DMLE then, but even he would have had to investigate if he'd received official documentation contradicting the accepted narrative. Griphook made a note in his ledger. This constitutes interference with the execution of a legal will, a serious offense under both ministry and goblin law. His expression was calculated. Gringotts take such matters very seriously, Lord Potter. As do I, Harry said, carefully refolding the wills. I want copies of these for my records, and I want to schedule official readings as soon as possible. Who would have received notifications of the original readings before the wills were sealed? According to protocol, all named beneficiaries would have been summoned, Griphook replied. Including Lord Black, the Longbottoms, Professor McGonagall, Madame Bones, the Weasley family, and... He checked the documents again, Severus Snape, among others. None of whom ever mentioned being summoned, Sirius growled. Because they never were. Dumbledore made sure of that. We'll need to contact them all, Harry decided. But discreetly. I don't want Dumbledore knowing we've unsealed the wills until I'm ready to confront him. A wise precaution, Griphook agreed. Now, as to the other vaults you wished to visit today. The remainder of the day passed in a blur of discoveries as Harry visited several more family vaults. The Peveril Vault, one of the oldest and most heavily protected, contained artifacts of such obvious power that even Griphook seemed impressed. A peculiar wand that hummed with energy when Harry approached it. A silvery cloak that he recognized immediately as his father's invisibility cloak, though according to the documentation accompanying it, it was actually a priceless family heirloom dating back to the original Peveril brothers. The cloak of invisibility, Sirius breathed, reading the ancient parchment. Not just any invisibility cloak, but the cloak. From the tale of the three brothers. The children's story? Harry asked, confused. Not just a story, apparently. Sirius gestured to the wand and a strange stone set in a ring that completed the display. The Elder Wand. The Resurrection Stone. The Cloak of Invisibility. Together, they're known as the Deathly Hallows, artifacts supposedly created by Death himself. But my cloak is at Hogwarts, in my trunk, Harry protested. If it's such a valuable artifact, why was it just given to me as a Christmas present my first year? Good question, Sirius said, his expression darkening. Especially since, according to this, Dumbledore borrowed it from your father shortly before their deaths. It should have been in the vault all these years, not in Dumbledore's possession. Each vault revealed more connections, more evidence of Dumbledore's intricate manipulations. The Gaunt Vault, connected to Harry through a distant maternal line that had apparently retained its magic despite generations of Muggle interbreeding, contained documentation about another family heirloom, a locket bearing the Slytherin crest that had gone missing decades earlier. The timing aligns with Tom Riddle's disappearance from Wizarding records, Griphook noted, examining the ledger. Before he re-emerged as Lord Voldemort. Tom Riddle? Harry asked sharply. What does he have to do with the Gaunts? His mother was Mara P. Gaunt, last known female of the line, Griphook explained. Making him, and by extension you through your distant connection to the Gaunts, an heir of Slytherin. The revelation stunned Harry into momentary silence. He shared blood, however distant, with Voldemort himself. It explained the Parseltongue, the Sorting Hat's insistence that he would do well in Slytherin, perhaps even the strange connection he'd always felt to the Dark Lord. Dumbledore knew this too, he finally said. He must have. As Chief Warlock, with access to family records. It does raise the question of why he kept it from you, Sirius agreed. Especially given how much it troubled you to discover you were a Parselmouth. By late afternoon, Harry's head was swimming with information. They'd visited 7 vaults, gathered dozens of documents, and uncovered connections spanning centuries of magical history. Throughout it all, one pattern emerged with disturbing clarity. Albus Dumbledore had been methodically inserting himself into Harry's family legacy long before Harry was even born. I need time to process all of this, Harry admitted as they prepared to return to Grimmauld Place. There's too much information to absorb at once. A sensible approach, Griphook approved. However, there is one more matter requiring your immediate attention. He slid a final folder across his desk. Notifications of your changed status have begun propagating through magical channels. While the ministry paperwork moves slowly, magical contracts respond immediately to shifts in status. Magical contracts? Harry opened the folder with a growing sense of unease. What contracts? A betrothal agreement, negotiated by your magical guardian approximately 4 years ago. Harry's blood ran cold. I'm betrothed. To whom? To Miss Ginevra Weasley, Griphook replied, watching Harry's reaction carefully. The contract was signed by Albus Dumbledore as your magical guardian and Arthur Weasley as head of the Weasley family. It includes substantial financial considerations, including a bride price of 50,000 galleons, already paid from the Potter vaults to the Weasley family vault. That's impossible, Sirius interrupted. James and Lily would never have arranged a marriage contract for Harry, they were adamantly opposed to such arrangements. They did not, Griphook confirmed. This contract was created and executed on October 31st, 1992, Halloween of Mr. Potter's second year at Hogwarts. Harry's mind raced back. The Chamber of Secrets had been opened. Ginny had been acting strangely. And at some point during that chaos, Dumbledore had apparently found time to arrange Harry's marriage to a girl he barely knew. Can it be broken? He asked, struggling to keep his voice even. It already is, Griphook replied with a thin smile. Your emancipation rendered the contract void, as it was signed by a guardian whose authority has been superseded. However, the financial transactions remain valid, the bride price must be returned, and there may be penalties for breaking the agreement. I want to see the full contract, Harry said, anger bubbling beneath his calm exterior. And I want to know if the Weasleys were aware of where that money came from. The contract itself was complex legal language, but the essentials were clear. Harry was to marry Ginny upon her graduation from Hogwarts, at which point he would become the financial provider for the extended Weasley family. His seats on the Wisengamot would be voted by Arthur Weasley until Harry reached 30 years of age. Most disturbingly, any children of the Union would be raised, under the guidance of Albus Dumbledore or his designated successor as head of the Light. This isn't a marriage contract, Sirius growled after reading it. It's a bloody ownership transfer. The question is whether the Weasleys understood what they were signing, Harry said, thinking of Ron and his family's consistent kindness. Mr. Weasley's signature is here, but that doesn't mean he knew all the implications. There's one way to find out, Sirius suggested. Arthur Weasley is an honorable man. If he was misled, he deserves to know. Harry nodded slowly. I'll need to speak with him, but carefully. Ron and Ginny are my friends. I don't want to destroy that relationship if they're innocent in all this. A measured approach, Griphook approved. Now, regarding the funds transferred to the Weasley vault, leave them for now, Harry decided. Until I know who knew what, I won't demand repayment. The Weasleys aren't wealthy, and 50,000 galleons is a life-changing amount for them. The goblin nodded, making a note. Is there anything else you require today, Lord Potter? Harry thought for a moment. Yes. I need a complete accounting of all withdrawals made from my vaults by Dumbledore over the years, organized by recipient and purpose. I need to understand where my family's money went, and why. That will take some time to compile, Griphook warned. 42 years of transactions across multiple vaults. I understand. But it's necessary. As they prepared to leave, Harry turned back to the goblin. One more question, Griphook. Why didn't any of this come to light sooner? Weren't there audits, oversight, anything that might have raised questions about Dumbledore's activities? Griphook's expression turned grim. There should have been. Regular audits are standard procedure for accounts of this magnitude. The fact that none appears to have been conducted suggests. He hesitated. Interference at the highest levels, Sirius finished. Someone very powerful making sure no one looked too closely. Indeed. Griphook bowed slightly. Rest assured, Lord Potter, that Gringotts take such matters with the utmost seriousness. Our internal investigation will be thorough. The implied threat in those words was clear, and for the first time, Harry felt a flicker of sympathy for Dumbledore. Goblin justice was notoriously unforgiving. They returned to Grimmauld Place laden with shrunken documents, books, and artifacts gathered from the day's explorations. Creature had been busy in their absence. The drawing room had been transformed into a workable study space, with a large table for document review, comfortable chairs, and even a tea service waiting for their return. Master requires proper space for important Black family business, the elf explained when Harry thanked him. Creature has begun cleaning the house properly, yes he has. Over dinner, Harry and Sirius discussed their next steps. We need allies, Sirius argued. People we can trust who have the influence to help us when this eventually goes public, because it will, Harry. Something this big can't stay hidden forever. I know, Harry agreed. But we need to be strategic about who we approach and when. He pushed his plate away, thinking hard. Professor McGonagall was named in both wills as a potential guardian. She's always been fair to me, even strict sometimes, but fair. And she's close enough to Dumbledore to have valuable insights. Amelia Bones would be another good ally, Sirius suggested. She's rigorously honest and heads the DMLE, exactly who we'd need if legal challenges arise. What about Remus? Harry asked. He was one of my dad's best friends. Sirius hesitated. Remus is complicated. He owes Dumbledore a great deal for allowing him to attend Hogwarts despite his condition. That creates a loyalty that might be difficult to overcome. They continued debating potential allies late into the evening, carefully weighing each person's connection to Dumbledore against their likely loyalty to Harry or commitment to justice. By midnight, they had a short list of people to approach cautiously in the coming days. We should get some sleep, Sirius finally suggested. Tomorrow we need to start organizing everything we've learned, look for patterns, connections we might have missed. Harry nodded, exhaustion finally catching up with him. It's overwhelming. 2 days ago, I was just Harry Potter, the boy who lived with a vault full of gold for school supplies. Now I'm heir to 31 houses with properties I've never seen and political responsibilities I don't understand. You're still just Harry, Sirius said gently. The titles, the gold, the politics, they're tools, not your identity. Use them to build the life you want, not the life others have planned for you. That's just it, Harry admitted. I don't know what life I want. I've been so focused on surviving Voldemort, on meeting everyone's expectations, that I've never really thought about what I would choose for myself. Then that's the most important question to answer, Sirius replied. More important than Dumbledore's schemes or family legacies. What does Harry Potter want his life to be? It was a question that followed Harry to bed, echoing in his mind as he drifted towards sleep. What did he want? Freedom, certainly. Knowledge of his family. True friends who valued him for himself, not his fame or fortune. But beyond that. His thoughts were interrupted by a sudden, searing pain in his scar, so intense it drew a gasp from his lips. Along with the pain came a flash of emotion not his own, triumph, vicious and cold. Voldemort is happy about something, he realized with dread. Something has gone very right for him tonight. As the pain receded, Harry made a mental note to add another task to tomorrow's list, learning occlumency. If his connection to Voldemort was growing stronger, he needed protection, especially now that he had so many secrets to keep. Morning brought an unexpected development. As Harry and Sirius sorted through the mountain of documents from the previous day's vault visits, an unfamiliar owl arrived bearing a letter addressed to Lord Harry Potter Black. That was quick, Sirius remarked, eyeing the official-looking ministry seal. The bureaucracy rarely moves this efficiently. Harry opened the letter cautiously, half expecting bad news. Instead, he found a formal notification from the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. Lord Potterblack, it has come to our attention through certified documents from Gringotts Bank that your status has changed to that of an emancipated minor under the line continuity exemption of 1784. This letter serves as official recognition of that status by the Ministry of Magic. Given recent events and statements made by Albus Dumbledore regarding your claims about the return of he who must not be named, I would appreciate the opportunity to discuss several matters of importance with you at your earliest convenience. This letter can be replied to directly and will find me securely. Respectfully, Amelia Bones Head, Department of Magical Law Enforcement. Interesting, Sirius murmured, reading over Harry's shoulder. Amelia was on our list of potential allies, and she's reaching out first. But how did she know so quickly? Harry wondered. The goblins said the ministry paperwork would take days to process. Amelia has her own sources, Sirius explained. During the First War, she lost most of her family to Death Eaters. She's not someone who trusts easily or relies solely on official channels. If she's reaching out, she has her reasons. Harry reread the letter, noting the careful phrasing about recent events and statements made by Albus Dumbledore. She's referring to the Ministry's denial of Voldemort's return, he realized. Fudge has been using the Prophet to make me look like a delusional attention seeker, and Dumbledore like a power-hungry manipulator. Which is ironic, given what we've learned, Sirius noted dryly. Though in Dumbledore's case, not entirely inaccurate. I think we should meet with her, Harry decided. But somewhere neutral, not here or the Ministry. I know just the place, Sirius said with a growing smile. One of the Black family properties is a small townhouse in London with extensive privacy wards. The Ministry doesn't know about it, it's under a family fidelius that passes from head to head. Perfect for discreet meetings. Harry nodded, reaching for quill and parchment to compose a reply. As he wrote, another owl arrived, this one bearing the distinctive wax seal of Gringotts. The message inside was brief but significant. Lord Potter, our investigation has uncovered substantial irregularities in the handling of your accounts beyond those already discussed. Of particular concern is evidence suggesting memory modifications performed on Gringotts personnel responsible for overseeing the Potter vaults between 1981 to 1991. Given the serious nature of these findings, Director Ragnarok requests your presence at your earliest convenience for a confidential briefing. May your enemies tremble before you. Griphook Senior Account Manager Harry passed the note to Sirius, whose expression darkened as he read. Memory charms on goblins. That's not just illegal, it's practically an act of war against the goblin nation. Could Dumbledore really have gone that far? Harry asked, struggling to reconcile the grandfatherly headmaster with someone who would commit such a serious offense. The Dumbledore we thought we knew wouldn't, Sirius said grimly. But the Dumbledore who sealed wills, arranged marriages, and stole family heirlooms? I'm beginning to think there are depths to the man we never suspected. Harry finished his reply to Madame Bones, arranging to meet her the following afternoon at the Black townhouse Sirius had mentioned. Then he penned a response to Griphook, confirming he would visit Gringotts again that same morning. We need to be careful, Sirius warned as Harry sealed the letters. If Dumbledore realizes how much we've discovered, he might take drastic action. He has enormous influence and resources. Which is exactly why we need to keep gathering evidence and allies, Harry replied. The more people who know the truth, the harder it will be for him to maintain control of the narrative. As the owls departed with their responses, Harry turned back to the documents spread across the table. Now, let's see what else we can find out about Albus Dumbledore's 42-year obsession with my family. The rest of the day passed in meticulous documentation review. They created a timeline of suspicious activities, beginning with Dumbledore's first recorded access to a Potter-connected vault in 1938, shortly after he became Transfiguration Professor at Hogwarts and decades before Harry's birth. It's almost as if he identified your bloodlines as significant long before you were even conceived, Sirius observed, reviewing the earliest transactions. Look, withdrawals from the Peveril Vault specifically targeting artifacts related to the Deathly Hallows. Books from the Gryffindor Vault concerning ancient prophecies. Funding from multiple vaults for something called the Greater Good Initiative, in the 1940s. The Greater Good. Harry murmured, the phrase tickling something in his memory. Where have I heard that before? It was Grindelwald's slogan, Sirius explained grimly. For the greater good, the justification he used for attempting to overturn the international statute of secrecy and subjugate Muggles. Dumbledore defeated him in 1945, but before that. They were friends, Harry remembered suddenly. Hermione found it in a book last year, something Rita Skeeter mentioned during the tournament that actually turned out to be true. Dumbledore and Grindelwald were close as young men. More than friends, according to some rumors, Sirius added. But whatever their relationship, it ended badly. Still, it seems some of Grindelwald's philosophies might have influenced Dumbledore more than anyone realized. The pattern continued through the decades, strategic withdrawals, targeted borrowing of artifacts and books, small manipulations that seemed insignificant in isolation but formed a disturbing picture when viewed together. By the time James and Lily Potter entered the scene, Dumbledore had already spent 30 years carefully positioning himself to influence their lives, and eventually, their sons. He pushed them toward each other, Harry realized, reviewing correspondence found in his mother's trunk. Look at these letters from my mother to her friend Alice. She mentions Dumbledore repeatedly arranging situations where she and James would work together, despite her initial dislike of him. James was besotted with Lily from 5th year onward, Sirius confirmed. But she couldn't stand him until 7th year, when suddenly her attitude changed dramatically. His expression grew troubled. At the time, we just thought she'd finally seen his better qualities, but now. You think Dumbledore might have influenced her somehow? Magically? Sirius shook his head. Not necessarily magic, Albus was always more subtle than that. But he was a master manipulator. If he wanted two people together, he'd find a way to make it happen naturally. But why? Harry demanded. Why did it matter so much who my parents married? Bloodlines, Sirius said simply. The Potter line connected to Peveril and Gryffindor. The Evans line with its dormant connection to Ravenclaw. Dumbledore was assembling something, or someone. You. The implications were staggering. Harry's entire existence, his very genetic makeup, might have been engineered by Dumbledore's machinations, all for some purpose they still didn't fully understand. The prophecy, Harry said suddenly. My mother mentioned it in her letter. What if Dumbledore didn't just hear the prophecy, what if he worked to create the circumstances that would fulfill it? That level of manipulation would be. Sirius trailed off, clearly disturbed by the possibility. Exactly what we're seeing evidence of, Harry finished grimly. A 42-year plan culminating in a specific child with a specific destiny. As evening approached, they'd assembled a damning collection of evidence, financial records, correspondence, family histories, and magical artifacts that together told a story of extraordinary manipulation spanning decades. But significant questions remained. Why had Dumbledore gone to such lengths? What ultimate purpose did he envision for the child he'd helped create and shape? And most importantly, what would he do when he discovered that his carefully constructed plans were unraveling? We should get some rest, Sirius finally suggested as midnight approached. Tomorrow will be challenging, Gringotts in the morning, Amelia Bones in the afternoon. We'll need clear heads for both. Harry nodded, rubbing his tired eyes. I just wish I understood his endgame. What was worth 42 years of manipulation and theft? I don't know, Sirius admitted. But I'm beginning to think it goes beyond defeating Voldemort. Dumbledore's vision has always been larger than any single Dark Lord. As Harry headed to his room, his mind churned with possibilities. The magnitude of the deception he'd uncovered was almost incomprehensible. His entire life, his parents' lives, even, had been shaped by unseen hands moving them like pieces on a chessboard. The boy who had slept in a cupboard under the stairs, who had yearned for family and belonging, had actually been the heir to an immense legacy deliberately kept from him. The anger that had simmered inside him since that first meeting at Gringotts 2 days ago was transforming into something colder and more focused. This wasn't just about what had been taken from him, the gold, the properties, the political power. It was about the choices that had been made for him without his knowledge or consent. The paths deliberately closed off. The truth systematically hidden. No more, he whispered to the darkness of his room. No more manipulation. No more secrets. No more playing by Dumbledore's rules. Tomorrow would bring new revelations, new allies, new challenges. But for the first time, Harry felt he was moving forward on a path of his own choosing, not one laid out for him by others. Whatever Dumbledore had planned for the boy who lived, it was time for Harry Potter, Lord of 31 houses and heir to centuries of magical legacy, to start writing his own story. In his bed at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, Albus Dumbledore woke suddenly, a sense of unease pulling him from sleep. For a moment, he lay still, extending his magical senses outward, searching for the source of his discomfort. There, a subtle shift in the complex web of monitoring spells he maintained. One particular thread, one that had remained steady for nearly 14 years, had gone completely silent. The blood wards at Privet Drive had fallen. With a speed that belied his age, Dumbledore rose, donning a simple traveling cloak over his nightclothes. Minutes later, he apparat to the darkened street where Harry Potter was supposed to be safely ensconced with his Muggle relatives. The house appeared normal from the outside, no signs of magical disturbance, no dark mark hanging ominously overhead. But the protective magic that should have surrounded the property was gone, dissipated as though it had never existed. A flick of his wand confirmed what he already suspected: Harry Potter was no longer inside. Albus Dumbledore, considered by many to be the greatest wizard of the age, felt something he rarely experienced: genuine fear. Not for himself, but for carefully laid plans decades in the making, plans that now hung by the thinnest of threads. "Oh, Harry," he whispered to the silent night. "What have you discovered?" Chapter 3, Reclamation. Sleep eluded Harry that night. He tossed and turned, his mind racing through everything they'd discovered over the past few days. Near dawn, he gave up and went downstairs to find Sirius already in the kitchen, nursing a cup of tea, dark circles under his eyes suggesting a similarly restless night. "Couldn't sleep either?" Harry asked, sliding into a chair across from his godfather. Sirius shook his head. "Too much to think about." He pushed a steaming mug toward Harry. "I keep trying to reconcile the Dumbledore I thought I knew with the man who could orchestrate something this comprehensive." "I know," Harry agreed, wrapping his hands around the warm mug. "Part of me still wants to believe there's some explanation that makes sense. That all of this was somehow for my protection or the greater good or," he broke off, the phrase suddenly sour in his mouth. "The greater good," Sirius repeated grimly. "Amazing how much wrong can be done in the name of something that sounds so right." They sat in silence for a few minutes, the first weak rays of sunrise beginning to filter through the grimy kitchen windows. "Are you ready for today?" Sirius finally asked. Harry considered the question seriously. "No," he admitted. "But I don't think I ever will be. Some things you just have to face unprepared." Spoken like a true Potter, Sirius said with a faint smile. "Your father used to say something similar before order missions." Harry's heart ached at the mention of his father. "I wish I could have known them, Sirius. Not just through stories or photos or other people's memories. Really known them. They would be so proud of you," Sirius said softly. "Especially now, standing up for yourself, taking control of your own life. That's all they ever wanted for you." Before Harry could respond, a silvery lynx Patronus leapt through the kitchen wall, stopping before Sirius. When it spoke, it was in a deep, measured voice Harry didn't recognize. "Black. Dumbledore knows something is wrong. Emergency order meeting called for noon today at headquarters. He's asking about Potter's whereabouts. Proceed with caution." As the Patronus faded, Sirius muttered a curse. "Kingsley. He's an Auror, member of the Order, one of the few who knows I'm innocent." "And headquarters?" Harry asked. "Where is that?" Sirius's expression turned wry. "You're sitting in it. Dumbledore convinced me to offer Grimmauld Place as Order headquarters after Voldemort's return. It's under Fidelius with Dumbledore as secret keeper. So he'll be coming here. Today." Harry felt a surge of panic. He wasn't ready to confront Dumbledore yet, not before meeting with Gringotts and Amelia Bones. "He can't get in," Sirius reassured him. "Not anymore. When you claimed your lordship and I formally acknowledged you as my heir, the house's allegiance shifted. Grimmauld Place is now under the protection of the combined Potterblack family magic. The previous Fidelius has been overridden, for lack of a better term." Harry blinked. "Is that possible?" "Family magic trumps almost everything else," Sirius explained. "It's older and more primal than most modern spells. The Blacks were paranoid about security. The house has protections that activate automatically when ownership changes, preventing former guests from entering without new permission. Relief flooded through Harry. So we have time. Sirius agreed. Though Dumbledore will realize something significant has happened when he can't access headquarters. We should accelerate our plans. How did he know I was gone from Privet Drive? Harry wondered. I didn't leave a note or anything. Monitoring charms, most likely, Sirius said grimly. Probably tied to the blood wards. Once those fell. Because I was emancipated, Harry realized. The protection based on me being a minor under my aunt's roof wouldn't work anymore. Exactly. And Dumbledore would have been alerted immediately. Harry checked the time, barely 6 in the morning. Our appointment at Gringotts isn't until 9. We should go early, Sirius suggested. Ragnarok will see us. This situation warrants urgency. Harry nodded, mind already shifting to the day ahead. We need to bring everything we've organized so far, all the evidence. If Gringotts is willing to formally acknowledge Dumbledore's misconduct, it strengthens our position with Madame Bones. And if the goblins found evidence of memory charms. Sirius's expression hardened. That's a serious criminal offense. Multiple offenses, actually, use of memory charms without consent, interfering with banking operations, potential line theft. Enough to arrest him? Harry asked, surprised by the flutter of uncertainty he felt at the prospect. Despite everything, the idea of Dumbledore in Azkaban seemed almost unthinkable. Potentially, Sirius acknowledged. Though Dumbledore has many allies and significant political influence. It would be a complex legal battle. Harry stood, suddenly restless. We should get ready. The sooner we meet with Ragnarok, the better. An hour later, they arrived at Gringotts, Harry dressed in the best clothes he owned and Sirius disguised with a combination of glamour charms and a hooded cloak. The bank had just opened, but their request to see Director Ragnarok was met with immediate attention. Unlike Griphook's functional office, Ragnarok's chamber was clearly designed to impress. Ornate gold veins ran through the marble walls, ancient weapons and treasures displayed in glass cases spoke of goblin victories, and the massive desk appeared carved from a single piece of obsidian. Director Ragnarok himself was older than any goblin Harry had seen, his skin deeply lined, his eyes sharp and calculating beneath bushy white eyebrows. When he spoke, his voice was surprisingly melodious despite its gravelly undertone. Lord Potter. Lord Black. Gringotts acknowledges your presence with appropriate gravity, given the circumstances. Thank you for seeing us earlier than scheduled, Director, Harry replied, taking the seat Ragnarok indicated. Recent developments have created some urgency. Indeed. Ragnarok gestured, and Griphook entered carrying a heavy file. Our investigation has progressed rapidly since your last visit. What we have uncovered is disturbing, even by wizard standards. Griphook placed the file before Ragnarok, who opened it with careful precision. Over the past 48 hours, our security division has conducted thorough magical examinations of all personnel associated with your accounts. 7 senior goblins, including 2 former account managers, show evidence of repeated memory modifications over a span of decades. 7. Sirius looked shocked. That's not opportunistic interference, that's systematic. Precisely, Ragnarok agreed. The pattern suggests deliberate, ongoing manipulation of our internal procedures. The magical signature associated with these modifications is consistently identifiable as belonging to Albus Dumbledore. Harry felt sick. How did he get away with it for so long? Aren't there protections against this kind of thing? There are, Ragnarok's expression darkened. Extensive ones. Which is why this violation is particularly egregious. Our investigation indicates that Dumbledore exploited a specific vulnerability. His position as your magical guardian combined with his authority as chief warlock allowed him legitimate initial access. Once granted entry to certain secure areas, he appears to have performed subtle modifications rather than outright obliviations, altering perceptions of appropriate procedures rather than erasing memories entirely. Harder to detect, Sirius observed grimly. Indeed. These affected employees believed they were following proper protocols while actually bypassing critical security measures. Ragnar's clawed fingers tapped the file. The modifications were discovered only because Lord Potter's claim of his inheritance triggered automatic security reviews. What would have happened if I hadn't come to Gringotts? Harry asked. If things had continued as they were. Ragnar and Griphook exchanged a look that Harry couldn't interpret. Based on the pattern of withdrawals and the accelerating frequency of memory modifications, our analysis suggests the Potter and connected vaults would have been depleted by approximately 70% within the next 3 years, Ragnar finally said. Certain key artifacts would have been permanently removed from family control, and significant political powers associated with your houses would have been effectively neutralized. In time for my 17th birthday, Harry realized. When I would have legally come into my inheritance anyway. Precisely. By then, you would have found yourself lord in name only, your wealth greatly diminished, your political influence undermined, and your most powerful family artifacts relocated beyond your reach. Sirius swore under his breath. The perfect crime. By the time Harry could legally question anything, there would be little left to claim and no obvious evidence of wrongdoing. What happens now? Harry asked, struggling to process the magnitude of what they were discussing. Gringotts has already begun recovery procedures, Ragnar explained. All access to your vaults by anyone other than yourself has been permanently revoked. We have initiated traces on significant withdrawals made over the past decade with the intention of recovering misappropriated assets where possible. And the criminal aspect? Sirius pressed. Memory charms on goblins violate the Treaty of 1752, don't they? They do. Ragnar's smile was thin and cold. Gringotts has prepared formal charges against Albus Dumbledore for presentation to both the Ministry of Magic and the Goblin High Council. However, he added, eyeing Harry carefully, as the primary injured party, you have certain discretion in how aggressively these charges are pursued. Harry understood the unspoken question. You're asking if I want to press charges? I am acknowledging that this situation has political and personal dimensions beyond banking regulations, Ragnar replied diplomatically. Albus Dumbledore holds significant positions of authority. A public confrontation would have far-reaching consequences, for the wizarding world and for you personally. Harry considered this carefully. I want justice, but I also want to understand why. Before any public accusations, I need to confront him privately, hear his explanation, if he has one. A measured approach, Ragnar approved. However, be advised that Gringotts' complaint regarding treaty violations will proceed regardless. The memory modifications of goblin employees cannot be overlooked. I understand. Harry hesitated, then added, there's something else we discovered, something that might be connected. According to records we found, Dumbledore has been accessing vaults connected to my bloodline since 1938, long before my parents were even born. Ragnar's bushy eyebrows rose. That would align with his early career at Hogwarts. And with his relationship with Grindelwald, Sirius added. We found references to funding for something called the Greater Good Initiative, in the 1940s. If goblins could pale, Harry thought Ragnar might have. The director sat very still for a long moment. This adds context to certain historical questions. He glanced at Griphook. Retrieve file G, 7734. While Griphook was gone, Ragnar steepled his fingers. I have served as director for 103 years, Lord Potter. In that time, I have observed many dark wizards rise and fall. What few understand is that darkness rarely announces itself with obvious malevolence. The most dangerous movements begin with reasonable-sounding ideals. Like the greater good, Harry murmured. Indeed. Ragnar nodded as Griphook returned with an ancient-looking file bound in faded red leather. This contains Gringotts' internal records regarding certain financial activities during the Grindelwald conflict. It has been sealed since 1946. The director opened the file carefully, scanning its contents before selecting a specific document. Here. A financial trace conducted after Grindelwald's defeat identified unusual patterns of funding. Multiple old family vaults showing regular withdrawals supporting research into something called the Hallows Initiative, later renamed the Greater Good Foundation. The Deathly Hallows, Sirius breathed. That connects to the Peveril Vault, to artifacts we know Dumbledore took. According to this analysis, Ragnarok continued, the Foundation officially dissolved after Grindelwald's defeat, but the pattern of withdrawals from certain vaults continued under different designations. Including vaults connected to the Potter, Peveril, and Black families. Harry's mind raced. Are you suggesting that whatever Dumbledore and Grindelwald were working on together didn't end when Dumbledore defeated him? I am merely presenting financial facts, Ragnarok said carefully. The interpretation is yours. However, he added, sliding the document toward Harry, this final notation may be relevant to your situation. At the bottom of the page, in faded ink, was a brief comment, subject appears focused on bloodlines with connections to founders and Peveril brothers. Possible interest in prophecy of threefold power. Recommendation, continued monitoring. Threefold power? Harry looked up questioningly. An ancient prophecy, Ragnarok explained, dating back to the founding of Hogwarts. It speaks of a descendant of three founders who would wield unprecedented magical power, power that could remake the world according to their will. The implications hit Harry like a physical blow. And I'm connected to Gryffindor through the Potters, to Slytherin through the Gaunts, and to Ravenclaw through my mother's line. Making you the first wizard in recorded history with blood ties to 3 of the 4 founders, Ragnarok confirmed. If one believed in such prophecies, you would be a person of extraordinary interest. Dumbledore believes in prophecies, Harry said grimly, remembering his mother's letter. He's been making decisions based on one about me and Voldemort for years. Then perhaps these 2 prophecies are connected in his mind, Ragnarok suggested. It would explain a decades-long interest in specific bloodlines that eventually converged in you, Lord Potter. The pieces were starting to fit together in a disturbing pattern. Dumbledore's manipulation of Harry's parents' relationship. His immediate seizure of control over Harry after their deaths. The systematic diminishing of Harry's inheritance and the careful control of his knowledge and environment. He's been shaping me, Harry realized, the words barely above a whisper. Like a gardener pruning a tree to grow in a specific direction. Keeping me ignorant of my power and potential while positioning himself as my mentor and guide. The question remains why, Sirius said, his expression troubled. To what end? Perhaps that is a question best asked directly, Ragnarok suggested. Now that you approach this conversation from a position of knowledge rather than ignorance. Harry nodded slowly, his resolve strengthening. I intend to. But first, we have another meeting today, with Madame Bones. Can we take copies of this evidence? Certainly. Ragnarok gestured, and Griphook began preparing duplicates. However, I recommend discretion regarding the prophecy information. Such things can be easily misinterpreted. As they prepared to leave, Ragnarok fixed Harry with an evaluating gaze. A final matter, Lord Potter. As you have claimed your inheritance, you are entitled to undergo the ritual of magical recognition. What's that? Harry asked. A ceremony that fully activates dormant family magics in the air, Sirius explained, looking surprised. It's rarely offered these days, considered old magic, something many modern wizards overlook. With connections to so many ancient lines, the ritual could be particularly significant for you, Ragnarok added. It would formally bind the family magics to your core, potentially unlocking abilities or affinities that have remained dormant due to your unconventional upbringing. Harry exchanged a look with Sirius, who nodded encouragingly. When could this be done? He asked. It requires preparation, Ragnarok replied. 3 days hence, at moonrise. The ritual chamber must be prepared, and you should spend that time in contemplation of your heritage. 3 days, Harry repeated. After I've spoken with Dumbledore. A wise sequence, Ragnarok approved. Confrontation first, then renewal. He rose, signaling the end of the meeting. May your enemies fall before you, Lord Potter. And may your gold multiply, Director Ragnarok, Harry replied, remembering the formal farewell. As they left the bank, Harry's mind buzzed with new questions. The threefold power prophecy added yet another layer to Dumbledore's possible motivations, and made his betrayal seem even more calculated. We have a few hours before meeting Amelia, Sirius noted, checking the time. What do you want to do? I need to process all this, Harry admitted. And prepare for the meeting. If we're going to bring the head of the DMLE into this, we need to be clear about what we're asking for. They returned to Grimmauld Place to organize their evidence and prepare for the afternoon meeting. To Harry's surprise, an elegant tawny owl was waiting for them, perched regally on the back of a chair in the drawing room. That's McGonagall's owl, Sirius identified immediately, untying the letter from its leg. I'd recognize Helios anywhere. The letter was addressed to both of them, Sirius and Harry. If you are indeed together, Albus returned from Privet Drive in a state I have rarely witnessed. The blood wards have fallen, and Harry is missing. An emergency order meeting has been called, but more concerning is what Albus is not saying. I have served as his deputy for decades and know when he is concealing significant information. His reaction goes beyond concern for Harry's safety, there is fear there, and something that looks remarkably like guilt. If you are together and safe, a simple confirmation would ease my mind considerably. If larger issues are at play, perhaps we might speak privately before the general meeting. With concern, Minerva McGonagall, do we trust her? Harry asked, uncertain. McGonagall had always been fair to him, even strict sometimes, but she was also Dumbledore's deputy and had never questioned his decisions regarding Harry's placement with the Dursleys. Sirius considered the question seriously. Minerva has always been her own person, despite her loyalty to Hogwarts and Albus. She's rigidly ethical. If she learned Dumbledore had been acting improperly, she wouldn't simply look the other way. She was named in both my parents' wills as a potential guardian, Harry noted. They must have trusted her. They did, Sirius confirmed. James especially, she was his mentor in Transfiguration and sponsored his animagus training after graduation. Harry made his decision. We'll meet with her, after Madame Bones. But let's just confirm we're safe for now, nothing more. Sirius nodded, quickly penning a brief reply, we are both safe and well. We'll explain circumstances soon. Please keep knowledge of this communication between us for now. As the day progressed toward their meeting with Madame Bones, Harry found himself growing increasingly nervous. This would be his first real step toward publicly challenging Dumbledore's authority, bringing law enforcement into what had previously been a private investigation. Remember, Sirius advised as they prepared to leave, Amelia is first and foremost committed to justice and proper procedure. Present the facts clearly, provide the evidence, and let her draw her own conclusions. She won't appreciate any attempt to manipulate her perspective. Like Dumbledore would, Harry muttered. Exactly. The best way to differentiate yourself from his methods is to be transparent and direct. The Black family townhouse in Kensington was a surprise, a narrow but elegant building wedged between two Muggle residences, completely invisible to non-magical eyes. Inside, it was considerably brighter and more modern than Grimmauld Place, with large windows and tasteful, if somewhat outdated, furnishings. My uncle Alfred lived here, Sirius explained as they waited for Madame Bones to arrive. The reasonable Black, my mother called him, meaning he wasn't a raving blood purist. He left me his gold when he died, got himself blasted off the family tapestry for it. At precisely 3 o'clock, the fireplace flared green, and Amelia Bones stepped through. She was a square-jawed witch with short grey hair and a monocle that gave her a severe appearance, but her eyes were sharp and evaluating rather than cold. Lord Potter. Lord Black. She nodded to each of them. Thank you for agreeing to meet under these unusual circumstances. Thank you for coming, Madame Bones, Harry replied, gesturing to the chairs they'd arranged. We appreciate your discretion. Before we begin, she said, remaining standing, I must clarify something. I am here in my capacity as head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. If criminal matters are discussed, I am obligated to act upon that information according to the law. Do you understand? We do, Sirius confirmed. In fact, that's precisely why we wanted to meet with you. She nodded once, then finally took a seat, placing a slim briefcase on the table between them. Then let's proceed. My office received formal notification of Lord Potter's emancipation yesterday evening, along with some, concerning documentation from Gringotts regarding possible financial improprieties involving his accounts. The goblins moved quickly, Sirius observed. They tend to, when matters of gold and treaty violations arise. Amelia fixed Harry with a direct gaze. However, before we discuss that, I'd like to address the other matter mentioned in my letter. Your claims regarding the return of you-know-who, which the Ministry has officially denied. Harry tensed, but her next words surprised him. I believe you, she said simply. My niece Susan has spoken highly of your character, and unlike some of my colleagues, I find it difficult to believe you would fabricate such a serious claim. Furthermore, there have been patterns of activity over the summer that align with what one might expect following such a return. Thank you, Harry said, genuinely grateful for her straightforward approach. That's more consideration than I've received from most of the Ministry. The Ministry is not monolithic, despite what the prophet suggests, Amelia replied dryly. Now, regarding these financial improprieties, I've received preliminary reports, but I'd appreciate hearing directly from you what has transpired. For the next hour, Harry and Sirius methodically presented everything they discovered, the hidden inheritance, Dumbledore's decades of financial manipulation, the sealed wills, the betrothal contract, and finally, the memory modifications of Gringotts staff. Amelia listened without interruption, occasionally making notes but otherwise giving nothing away through her expression. When they finished, she was silent for several long moments. If even half of these allegations can be substantiated, she finally said, this constitutes one of the most comprehensive cases of financial and magical malfeasance I've encountered in my career. The evidence is substantial, Sirius assured her. Gringotts has verified the magical signatures on the withdrawals, the memory modifications, and the falsified authorizations. Memory modification of goblin banking officials alone would warrant serious charges, Amelia noted. Combined with the other allegations. She shook her head. This would typically result in immediate arrest warrants. Typically? Harry questioned. Albus Dumbledore is not a typical suspect, she pointed out. He holds multiple positions of significant authority and has a public reputation as the greatest wizard of the age. Proceeding against him requires careful consideration of potential repercussions, political, social, and yes, magical. You're saying he's too powerful to face justice? Sirius asked sharply. I'm saying that justice in this case requires strategy, not just righteous indignation. Amelia's gaze was steady. Tell me, Lord Potter, what outcome are you seeking here? Mere punishment, or something more substantive? Harry considered the question carefully. I want the truth acknowledged. I want my family's legacy restored. And I want to ensure Dumbledore can't continue manipulating others the way he manipulated me. Reasonable objectives, she approved. And likely more achievable than simply seeing him in Azkaban, which, given his age and status, might well be perceived as a cruelty rather than justice, regardless of how deserved. What do you suggest? Sirius asked, slightly mollified. A multi-pronged approach, Amelia replied. First, formal charges filed but sealed pending a preliminary hearing, avoiding immediate public spectacle while ensuring legal proceedings are initiated. Second, official reinstatement of Lord Potter's full inheritance and political standing, with public notification through proper ministry channels. Third, and perhaps most importantly, removal of Dumbledore from his positions of authority through established governmental procedures rather than criminal arrest. Would that be enough? Harry wondered. He'd still be free, still potentially dangerous. A wizard stripped of his positions, publicly discredited, and facing sealed charges that could be unsealed at any time is effectively neutralized, Amelia pointed out. His power derives largely from his authority and reputation. Remove those, and what remains is merely an elderly wizard with admittedly impressive magical abilities but limited capacity to influence events. Harry could see the logic in her approach. A public arrest of Dumbledore might create martyrdom, division among those who still respected him. A systematic dismantling of his authority would be more effective in the long run. There's something else to consider, Amelia added. Your claims about you-know-who's return. If Dumbledore is publicly disgraced through arrest, the Ministry's position opposing both of you is strengthened. If, however, he is removed for unrelated misconduct, it creates space for a re-evaluation of your claims independent of his support. Political chess, Sirius observed with grudging respect. Sometimes justice requires finesse as well as force, Amelia replied. Now, I'll need formal statements from both of you, and copies of all evidence you've gathered. Additionally, she hesitated, then continued more carefully, given the seriousness of these allegations, I would advise against confronting Dumbledore privately before legal proceedings are initiated. I need to hear his explanation, Harry insisted. Not for his sake, but for mine. I need to understand why. Amelia studied him for a moment, then nodded. I understand that need. However, I would request that such a conversation be properly documented and witnessed. Perhaps through use of a pensive recording or similar objective measure. That's reasonable, Sirius agreed before Harry could object. We want answers, not a manipulated narrative. The remainder of the meeting focused on procedural details, formal statements were given, evidence catalogued, and a timeline established for the legal proceedings. By the time Madame Bones departed, Harry felt both exhausted and oddly relieved. The burden of discovery was now shared, the path forward clearer, if not easier. She's impressive, Harry commented as they returned to Grimmauld Place. Thorough. Amelia Bones is one of the few ministry officials I genuinely respect, Sirius agreed. If anyone can navigate the political minefield of charging Albus Dumbledore, it's her. Back at headquarters, they found 2 more letters waiting, one from McGonagall confirming that the order meeting had been postponed due to unforeseen complications with headquarters access, and another from Gringotts containing detailed information about the ritual of magical recognition. We should respond to Minerva, Sirius suggested. Invite her here tomorrow, before things start moving officially. Harry agreed, and they sent a brief note arranging a meeting for the following morning. As evening approached, Harry found himself drawn back to his mother's trunk, seeking some connection to her as he faced the most significant confrontation of his life. Among her journals, he found one dated just months before her death, the entries growing increasingly concerned about Dumbledore's interest in Harry. October 12, 1981. Albus visited again today, ostensibly to check the wards but really to observe Harry. The way he watches my son disturbs me, not with the grandfatherly affection he projects, but with something closer to calculation. He asked again about Harry's magical development, whether we've noticed any unusual abilities or accidental magic. When I mentioned that Harry had summoned his stuffed dragon from across the room yesterday, Albus's eyes took on that gleam I've come to distrust. Remarkable control for one so young, he said, as though mentally adding another tick to some checklist I'm not privy to. James thinks I'm being paranoid, that Albus is merely taking a natural interest in the child named in the prophecy. Perhaps that's true. But I cannot shake the feeling that his interest in Harry predates the prophecy, that it connects to something older, something he's never fully explained. I've continued my research into protective magic. The blood shield ritual seems our best option if the worst happens. I've already begun the preliminary work, the runic markings on Harry that Albus assumed were just motherly fussing with birthmarks. If necessary, my sacrifice will shield him from even the killing curse. But who will shield him from Albus's plans? Reading his mother's final concern sent a chill through Harry. She had seen what no one else had recognized. Dumbledore's interest wasn't simply protection or mentorship. It was ownership. The next morning brought a new determination. Harry rose early, organizing the evidence they'd compiled and preparing for McGonagall's visit. When she arrived precisely at 10, her expression was a mixture of relief at seeing Harry safe and thinly veiled concern about the circumstances. "Mr. Potter." "Sirius." She nodded to each of them, declining to use Harry's new title until the situation was explained. "I cannot express how relieved I am to see you well, but I must ask, what precisely is happening?" "Albus is beside himself, headquarters is somehow inaccessible, and rumors are circulating among Order members about everything from Death Eater abductions to Ministry interference." "Please, sit down, Professor," Harry invited. "It's a long story, and not a pleasant one." Over the next hour, they explained the situation much as they had with Amelia Bones, though with more personal context given McGonagall's relationship with both Harry and Dumbledore. As the evidence mounted, her expression shifted from skepticism to shock, and finally to a cold anger Harry had never seen directed at anyone but misbehaving students. 42 years, she finally said, her Scottish brogue more pronounced in her distress. "All that time, working alongside him, and I never suspected." She looked directly at Harry, something like grief in her eyes. "I failed you, Mr. Potter. As your head of house, as your parents' friend, I should have questioned his decisions more rigorously." "You couldn't have known," Harry said, uncomfortable with her self-recrimination. "He fooled everyone." "Not everyone," she corrected sharply. "Not your mother, evidently. And I should have asked more questions when Hagrid mentioned where he'd collected you that night." Lily and James had made their feelings about Petunia quite clear over the years. "You knew about the wills?" Sirius asked. "Not specifically, but I knew their wishes regarding Harry's placement should anything happen to them." McGonagall's lips thinned to a tight line. "When I objected to the Dursleys, and I did object, most strenuously, Albus insisted it was the only way to ensure the blood protection. I deferred to his judgment, believing his priority was Harry's safety." "And now?" Harry asked quietly. "Now I find myself questioning every decision, every rationalization, every time I set aside my own judgment in favor of his supposed greater wisdom." She straightened in her chair. "I will not make that mistake again. What do you need from me, Mr. Potter?" Her directness was refreshing. "Your support, primarily. Madame Bones is initiating legal proceedings, but having the deputy headmistress of Hogwarts publicly acknowledge the validity of my claims would carry significant weight." "You shall have it," she promised without hesitation. "I've spent decades building a reputation for ethical rigidity. It's time that reputation served a purpose beyond frightening first years into proper transfiguration form." They discussed the practicalities of the coming confrontation, with McGonagall providing valuable insight into Dumbledore's likely reactions and potential vulnerabilities. As their meeting concluded, she fixed Harry with an evaluative gaze. "You've changed," she observed. "Not just physically, though I note you're standing straighter, speaking more confidently. There's something more fundamental." "I know who I am now," Harry said simply. "Not just the boy who lived or Harry Potter, orphan. I understand my heritage, my place in the magical world." "It changes your perspective." "Indeed it does." She nodded approvingly. "Well, Lord Potter, for you are that, regardless of whether I use the title, I believe you are about to change the wizarding world's perspective as well." After McGonagall departed, Harry and Sirius spent the remainder of the day finalizing their plans. Amelia had scheduled the official filing of charges for the following morning, with a preliminary hearing set for 3 days later, coincidentally, the same day as Harry's planned ritual of magical recognition. "We should confront him tomorrow afternoon," Sirius suggested. "After the charges are filed but before they're made public. That window gives us the advantage of knowing what's coming while he's still in the dark." "Where?" Harry asked. "Not here, I don't want him in this house again." "Hogwarts would give him too much advantage," Sirius mused. "Neutral ground would be best." "What about the Ministry?" Harry suggested. "Specifically, the DMLE conference rooms." Secure, monitored, and with Aurors nearby if needed. Perfect, Sirius agreed. I'll contact Amelia about arranging it. That evening, as Harry prepared for what would undoubtedly be the most significant confrontation of his life, he found himself returning to his mother's journals, drawing strength from her words and insight. She had seen through Dumbledore's manipulations when no one else could. Tomorrow, Harry would finally understand why those manipulations had been necessary in Dumbledore's mind. Morning brought a flurry of activity. Amelia sent confirmation that the charges had been formally filed under seal and that a ministry conference room had been secured for their meeting with Dumbledore. McGonagall reported that Dumbledore had spent much of the night attempting to locate Harry, growing increasingly agitated as his usual tracking methods failed. He doesn't understand how his connection to you has been severed, she wrote. The blood wards, the guardianship, the magical traces he's maintained for years, all gone without explanation. It's fascinating, in a troubling way, to see him genuinely wrong-footed. By early afternoon, everything was in place. Harry arrived at the ministry with Sirius and McGonagall, escorted directly to a secure conference room where Amelia Bones waited with two senior Aurors whose discretion she trusted implicitly. A pensieve sat in the center of the table, ready to record the coming confrontation for legal evidence. Albus has been summoned for a urgent matter regarding Hogwarts security, Amelia explained. He should arrive momentarily, unaware of your presence or the true purpose of the meeting. Harry nodded, nerves fluttering in his stomach despite his preparation. How did one confront a man like Dumbledore, a wizard whose manipulations had shaped not just Harry's life but apparently wizarding history itself? Remember, Sirius murmured, you hold the power now. Knowledge, legal standing, evidence, it's all on your side. Don't let him dictate the terms of the conversation. Before Harry could respond, the door opened, and Albus Dumbledore swept in, resplendent in deep purple robes embroidered with silver stars. He froze mid-step when he saw the room's occupants, his expression flickering briefly with genuine shock before settling into a grave concern that Harry now recognized as carefully calculated. Harry, my boy, he said warmly, though his eyes weren't twinkling as usual. What a relief to find you safe. We've been quite concerned about your disappearance from your relative's home. Have you? Harry replied coolly. I'm surprised you found time for concern, given how busy you've been managing my family's finances these past 42 years. The direct accusation landed like a physical blow. Dumbledore's composure slipped for just a moment, long enough for Harry to see something like fear flicker across his face. I see we have much to discuss, Dumbledore said carefully, taking the remaining seat at the table. Though I confess I'm uncertain why such a discussion requires such formal surroundings. The surroundings reflect the gravity of the situation, Albus, McGonagall said sharply. Lord Potter has discovered some deeply disturbing information regarding your management of his inheritance. Lord Potter. Dumbledore's eyebrows rose. I wasn't aware any formal acknowledgement of titles had occurred. My emancipation was confirmed by Gringotts 4 days ago, Harry explained, watching Dumbledore's reaction closely. Followed by my claim to the Potter lordship and approximately 30 other family lines to which I'm heir by blood or magic. 30. Dumbledore's mask slipped again, genuine alarm showing through. Harry, such claims require careful consideration. There are complexities to magical inheritances that you've been exploiting since before my parents were born, Harry interrupted, sliding a folder across the table. Gringotts has provided complete documentation of every withdrawal you've made from vaults connected to my bloodline since 1938. Every artifact borrowed. Every political proxy you've exercised without authorization. And every memory charm you performed on goblin banking officials, Amelia added pointedly. A serious violation of the Treaty of 1752, among numerous other laws. Dumbledore didn't touch the folder, his eyes never leaving Harry's face. You cannot possibly understand the context of these actions, Harry. The necessary precautions, the greater concerns that, the greater good? Harry suggested coldly. Like the Greater Good initiative you and Grindelwald founded. The one you continued funding from my family vaults long after his defeat? The color drained from Dumbledore's face. For several seconds, he seemed genuinely speechless, something Harry had never witnessed before. How did you learn of that? He finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Gringotts keeps excellent records, Sirius replied. Even of accounts you thought were untraceable. Dumbledore closed his eyes briefly, seeming to gather himself. When he looked at Harry again, the grandfatherly pretense had vanished, replaced by something more direct and, paradoxically, more honest. You deserve an explanation, he conceded. Though I doubt you will find it satisfying. Try me, Harry challenged. Very well. Dumbledore folded his hands on the table. It began, as you've discovered, in 1938, the year I encountered a remarkable magical signature while testing new students at Hogwarts. Tom Riddle's power was extraordinary, but it was the specific resonance of his magic that captured my attention. It aligned with certain, theoretical patterns I had been researching with Gellert years earlier. Patterns related to the Founder's bloodlines, Harry guessed. To the threefold power prophecy. If Dumbledore was surprised by Harry's knowledge, he hid it well. Yes. Our research suggested that magical power concentrates and evolves through certain bloodlines, occasionally producing individuals of extraordinary capability when those lines converge. Tom was a descendant of Slytherin, though he didn't know it then. And that justified stealing from my family vaults. I didn't consider it stealing, Dumbledore corrected mildly. Rather, necessary reallocation of resources to understand and prepare for what was coming. You see, the prophecy speaks not just of power, but of choice, a descendant of three founders who could either heal or destroy the magical world. When I recognized the pattern in Tom, I began tracking other potential convergences of founder bloodlines. Including my father's family, Harry realized. The Potters' connection to Gryffindor. Precisely. The Potters carried the Gryffindor line, diluted but still magically significant. I began monitoring several families, searching for potential matches that might produce a child of threefold heritage. Dumbledore's expression grew distant. Then Tom Riddle re-emerged as Lord Voldemort, and the urgency of my research increased exponentially. If he was the prophesied threefold heir, the consequences would be catastrophic. But he wasn't, Harry said flatly. He only had Slytherin blood. So I believed, until I discovered his maternal grandmother's connection to a squib branch of the Ravenclaw line. Dumbledore's revelation sent a ripple of shock through the room. Suddenly, the pattern became clear, and terrifying. Tom Riddle, with his hatred of Muggles and his extraordinary magical gifts, was potentially 2/3 of the way to fulfilling the prophecy. So you decided to create a counter, Sirius interjected. Another child with founder bloodlines who could oppose him. Dumbledore inclined his head slightly. Not create, precisely. Rather, ensure that if such a child emerged naturally, they would be properly guided. I began encouraging connections between promising bloodlines, including my parents, Harry finished, disgust rising in his throat. You manipulated them into a relationship. I merely created opportunities for connection, Dumbledore corrected. James Potter was already infatuated with Lily Evans. I simply helped him mature enough to win her regard. And when I discovered through certain magical tests that Lily, despite her Muggle parentage, carried dormant Ravenclaw magic, I knew their child would be significant. Did you know I would have 3 founder bloodlines? Harry demanded. Did you know about the connection to the Gaunts? Not initially, Dumbledore admitted. That discovery came later, after your parents' deaths. When I performed certain rituals to understand how you had survived Voldemort's attack, I uncovered the distant connection through your mother's maternal line to a squib branch of the Gaunt family. The room was silent as the implications sank in. Harry wasn't just the boy who lived by chance or his mother's sacrifice. He was the culmination of bloodlines Dumbledore had been tracking and influencing for decades. So the prophecy Trelawney made about me and Voldemort. Harry began. Was the second prophecy concerning you, Dumbledore confirmed. It specified the nature of your conflict with Tom, but the threefold prophecy defined the scope of your potential power. Together, they created a clear directive for how the wizarding world might be saved, or doomed. And that justified everything. Harry's voice rose slightly. The sealed wills. Leaving me with abusive relatives. Stealing family heirlooms and emptying vaults. Arranging a marriage contract with Ginny Weasley. Each decision served a purpose, Dumbledore insisted. The Dursleys were necessary for the blood protection, yes, but also to prevent you from developing the sense of entitlement and superiority that often accompanies knowledge of such heritage. Tom Riddle's arrogance was fueled by his discovery of his Slytherin ancestry. I sought to ensure you would develop differently. By keeping me ignorant and isolated? Harry asked incredulously. By ensuring you valued people over power, Dumbledore corrected. That you understood suffering and developed empathy rather than ambition. The artifacts I removed were those that might have revealed your heritage prematurely or contained knowledge too dangerous for a child. The marriage contract was designed to connect you firmly to a family known for their light alignment, preventing any drift toward darker influences. And the money? Sirius pressed. Millions of galleons, Albus. What purpose did that serve? For the first time, Dumbledore looked genuinely uncomfortable. The work of opposing Voldemort requires resources. The Order, protective measures, research into methods of defeating him permanently, the Ministry provides nothing for such efforts. So you just helped yourself to Harry's inheritance? McGonagall's voice was ice. I intended full restoration once the threat was eliminated, Dumbledore insisted. After Voldemort's final defeat, when the danger of Harry being influenced toward darker paths had passed. How convenient, Harry said coldly. And the memory charms on the goblins? Was that for my protection too? A regrettable necessity, Dumbledore admitted. Goblin neutrality could not be trusted, especially with Voldemort's return imminent. If they had revealed your full heritage, the risks would have been incalculable. Amelia Bones, who had been silent throughout much of the explanation, finally spoke. Regardless of your justifications, Albus, these actions constitute serious criminal offenses. Memory charms alone carry a minimum 5-year sentence in Azkaban. The financial improprieties would add considerably to that. I understand the legal perspective, Amelia, Dumbledore replied with dignity. But surely you understand that conventional legal frameworks cannot adequately address matters of prophecy and world-altering magical convergence. That's where you're wrong, Harry said quietly. Laws exist precisely to prevent individuals from deciding they know better than everyone else, from appointing themselves the arbiter of others' destinies. Dumbledore regarded Harry with what appeared to be genuine sadness. You have no idea what's truly at stake, my boy. I'm not your boy, Harry replied evenly. I never was. I was a tool you were crafting, a weapon you were forging against Voldemort, and perhaps against anyone else who opposed your vision of the greater good. Not a weapon, Dumbledore protested. A savior. The prophecies are clear, you have the potential to heal our world, to integrate what has been fragmented since the founders themselves quarreled. Or I could destroy it, Harry pointed out. Isn't that the choice the threefold prophecy mentions? Which outcome were you engineering, Professor? Dumbledore hesitated just long enough for Harry to see the truth. You don't know, Harry realized, a chill running through him. You've been manipulating my entire existence toward an outcome you can't even predict. I have been guiding you toward the light, Dumbledore insisted. Every decision, every intervention was designed to develop your capacity for love, sacrifice, compassion, the qualities that would ensure you chose healing over destruction when the moment came. By lying to me? By stealing from me? By controlling every aspect of my life? Harry shook his head in disbelief. Those aren't methods that inspire trust or compassion, Headmaster. They breed resentment and suspicion. A heavy silence fell over the room. Dumbledore suddenly looked every one of his years, the weight of decades of secrets and manipulations visible in the slump of his shoulders. What happens now? he finally asked, addressing not just Harry but everyone present. Legally, Amelia replied, formal charges have been filed this morning. Given the evidence, a conviction is virtually certain. However, she added, glancing at Harry, there may be room for negotiation regarding sentencing, depending on certain conditions. What conditions? Dumbledore asked cautiously. Harry leaned forward. Complete restoration of all withdrawn funds and removed artifacts. Immediate resignation from all positions of authority, Hogwarts, Wisengamot, International Confederation. Public acknowledgement of Voldemort's return and support for ministry preparations. And he paused, full disclosure of everything you know about the prophecies, Voldemort's methods of survival, and any other information relevant to the war. You're offering me a chance to avoid Azkaban, Dumbledore summarized, looking faintly surprised. I'm offering you a chance to do the right thing, finally, Harry corrected. To trust me with the truth and my own decisions rather than manipulating me toward your preferred outcome. Dumbledore studied him intently, as though seeing him clearly for the first time. You've changed, Harry. There's a certainty in you that wasn't there before, a foundation I didn't provide. I found it myself, Harry replied. Despite your efforts to keep me dependent and ignorant. Another silence fell, this one contemplative rather than tense. Finally, Dumbledore nodded slowly. I accept your terms, he said quietly. Though I maintain that my intentions, however flawed my methods, were ultimately for the greater, he stopped himself, lips twisting in a rueful smile. For the best, he amended. For you and for our world. Intentions mean little against outcomes, McGonagall observed sharply. And the outcome of your machinations was a boy who grew up unloved, unknowing of his heritage, and repeatedly placed in mortal danger. A fair assessment, Minerva, Dumbledore conceded. Perhaps my greatest failure was believing that the end would justify the means. He turned back to Harry. I will provide everything I know about the prophecies, about Tom's methods of survival, including my theory regarding Horcruxes, and any other information that may aid you in the coming conflict. Horcruxes? Sirius repeated, looking alarmed. Merlin's beard, Albus, if Voldemort created Horcruxes. I believe he created several, Dumbledore confirmed grimly. It explains his survival after the backfired killing curse, and certain, magical signatures I've detected over the years. That information alone is invaluable, Amelia noted. And would significantly impact any sentencing recommendations. The remainder of the meeting focused on practical arrangements, how Dumbledore would transition his various responsibilities, the schedule for information disclosure, and the process for returning Harry's stolen property. Throughout it all, Harry watched the old wizard carefully, searching for signs of continued manipulation or deception. What he saw instead was a man confronting the collapse of decades of careful planning, not with rage or denial, but with a kind of resigned acceptance. The contrast between this Dumbledore and the confident, twinkling-eyed headmaster he'd known for years was stark. As the meeting concluded and Dumbledore prepared to leave under Auror escort, he paused, turning back to Harry with an expression of genuine curiosity. May I ask what prompted your visit to Gringotts? After all these years, what finally led you to discover your heritage? A letter, Harry replied. From Gringotts, saying irregularities had been detected in my accounts. It arrived out of the blue. Dumbledore frowned. Gringotts initiated the contact. That's unusual. Their policy is typically reactive, not proactive. The notification was triggered by automated security protocols, Amelia explained. Apparently, a series of particularly large withdrawals over the past year triggered a dormant security feature in the Potter vaults. I see. Dumbledore nodded slowly. Then it seems my own actions finally undid my plans. A fitting conclusion, perhaps. He looked directly at Harry, the twinkle returning briefly to his blue eyes. I still believe you are destined for extraordinary things, Harry Potter. I only hope that when you finally understand the full scope of the prophecies, you will find it in your heart to forgive an old man's misguided methods in service of the right outcome." With that, he departed, leaving Harry with a complex mixture of emotions, anger still, certainly, but also a strange sort of pity for a man who had spent most of a century believing himself the only one capable of saving the world. The 3 days following Dumbledore's confession passed in a whirlwind of activity. News of his resignation from his various positions created an international sensation, though the reasons were carefully managed in public statements to focus on his desire to dedicate his remaining years to research and advisory roles, rather than the criminal charges that had prompted the decision. True to his word, Dumbledore provided extensive information about Voldemort's Horcruxes, the diary Harry had already destroyed, Slytherin's locket, Hufflepuff's cup, an unknown Ravenclaw artifact, and potentially others. Most disturbingly, he shared his suspicion that Harry's scar might itself contain a fragment of Voldemort's soul, a theory that explained the connection Harry had always felt to the Dark Lord. "There are rituals that can remove such a fragment without harming the host," Dumbledore assured them during one of several debriefing sessions. "I had been researching them for years, planning to implement the cleansing once the other Horcruxes were located and destroyed." The return of Harry's property was equally illuminating. Artifacts long removed from family vaults were restored, including several that Dumbledore had been actively using, most notably the Elder Wand, which he admitted had originally come from the Peveril Vault decades earlier. "The Deathly Hallows were my first obsession," he explained as he reluctantly handed over the legendary wand. "With Gellert, I believed they might be the key to reforming Wizarding Society, to preventing the need for secrecy and separation from Muggles. Later, I came to see them as tools in the fight against Voldemort. The wand has served me well, but it rightfully belongs to your bloodline." Harry's political re-emergence was handled with similar care. Formal notifications of his lordships were filed with the Wizengamot, but he delayed taking his seats until after the ritual of magical recognition, a decision Sirius strongly supported. "The ritual will change you," his godfather explained. "Not just magically, but in how you're perceived by the old families. Better to appear before the Wizengamot fully invested with your family magics than as a political novice they might try to manipulate." The night of the ritual arrived with a full moon hanging low over London. Harry made his way to Gringotts with Sirius and, surprisingly, McGonagall, who had been invited to witness the ceremony at Harry's request. "Family magic responds to connections beyond blood," Grip Hook had explained when approving her attendance. "As your father's mentor and a named guardian in your parents' will, Professor McGonagall carries a legitimate magical connection to your line." The ritual chamber deep beneath Gringotts was unlike anything Harry had seen before, a perfectly circular room with walls of untouched bedrock, the floor inscribed with intricate runic patterns that seemed to shift and change as he watched. In the center stood a raised stone platform surrounded by 31 pedestals, each bearing a family crest. "The preparations are complete," Director Ragnarok announced as they entered. "Lord Potter, please take your position at the center. Lord Black and Professor McGonagall will observe from the outer circle." Harry moved to the platform, feeling a strange resonance as his feet touched the stone, as though the very earth beneath Gringotts was responding to his presence. Around him, the crests of his many family lines gleamed in the torchlight: Potter, Black, Peveril, Gryffindor, Slytherin, Ravenclaw, and dozens of others he was still learning to recognize. "The ritual of magical recognition has been performed by Goblin Nation for wizarding families since the founding of Gringotts," Ragnarok explained, taking a position at the edge of the runic circle. "It acknowledges and activates dormant family magics, binding them to the recognized heir and unleashing potentials that may have lain dormant for generations." Four Goblin ritualists entered, taking positions at the cardinal points of the circle. Each carried a different ceremonial tool: a silver dagger, a crystal vial, a golden bowl, and an ornate wand that Harry suspected was far older than any wizard-made equivalent. "Blood freely given activates inheritance," Ragnarok intoned, nodding to the first ritualist, who approached with the silver dagger. "Magic freely accepted seals the bond." Harry extended his hand without hesitation. The cut was swift and precise, 7 drops of blood falling into the golden bowl held by the second ritualist. As the last drop fell, the runes beneath his feet flared to life, glowing with a soft golden light that gradually shifted through a spectrum of colors, each, Harry somehow knew, representing a different family line. "Speak the acknowledgement," Ragnarok directed. Harry had memorized the ritual words, but as he opened his mouth, different words entirely seemed to form on his tongue, words in a language he'd never studied yet somehow understood perfectly: sanguinem meum, magicum meum, hereditatem meum excipio. Quat fut, quat est, quat erit, Potter, Black, Peveril, Gryffindor, Ravenclaw, Slytherin, eti omnes familiae me. Recipio eti honoro. As he spoke, the pedestals around him began to glow, one by one, the family crests seeming to detach themselves and flow toward him in streams of colored light. Each stream touched him, sank into him, bringing with it sensations and knowledge and emotions that were both foreign and intimately familiar. From the Potter line came a deep affinity for transfiguration and battle magic, along with flashes of family memory, generations of Potters standing against dark forces, protecting the innocent, valuing justice over expedience. The Black family magic brought something darker but no less powerful, an intuitive understanding of the deeper currents of magic, the places where light and dark blurred together in the most ancient forms of spellcraft. Peveril magic carried echoes of death itself, not as something to be feared, but as a natural force to be respected and occasionally negotiated with. With it came a profound connection to the Hallows that Harry now understood were his birthright. Each family line contributed its own magical signature, its own gifts and affinities, building within Harry a tapestry of power unlike anything he'd experienced before. The founder bloodlines, Gryffindor's courage made manifest, Ravenclaw's intuitive comprehension, Slytherin's subtle manipulations of magical intent, resonated most strongly, weaving together in patterns of light and energy visible even to the observers. "Extraordinary," he heard McGonagall whisper from the edge of the circle. "I've never seen such a complete integration." The ritual reached its climax as the final family magic, the ancient Burke line, joined the swirling energies surrounding Harry. For a moment, he felt suspended between worlds, his consciousness expanded beyond normal boundaries. He could sense the ley lines running deep beneath London, the ancestral magics woven into the very foundations of places like Hogwarts and the Ministry, the complex web of oaths and bonds that structured wizarding society. Then, with a sound like distant thunder, the swirling energies collapsed inward, absorbing completely into his magical core. The sensation was overwhelming, heat and cold, pain and pleasure, expansion and contraction all at once. Harry gasped, dropping to one knee as his body struggled to integrate the massive influx of power and knowledge. "Breathe through it," Ragnarok instructed calmly. "Your magic is reordering itself, recognizing its true nature for the first time." Gradually, the intense sensation subsided, replaced by a profound feeling of wholeness, as though pieces of himself he'd never known were missing had finally slotted into place. When he stood again, Harry knew without being told that the ritual had succeeded beyond anyone's expectations. "The integration is complete," Ragnarok announced, satisfaction evident in his voice. "Lord Potterblack Peveril and all acknowledged houses, you are recognized by magic itself as the true heir of 31 noble lines." The heir ring on Harry's finger had transformed, now bearing a complex sigil that somehow incorporated elements of all his family crests without appearing cluttered or confused. More significantly, he could feel the family magic settling within him, accessible in a way they hadn't been before. "How do you feel?" Sirius asked as the ritual concluded and the goblins began clearing the chamber. "Different," Harry admitted. "More, connected to everything. And the magic." He held up his hand, watching with fascination as sparks of multicolored light danced across his fingertips without any conscious effort. "It's like I've been trying to see through foggy glasses all my life, and someone finally gave me the right prescription." "The ritual affects different heirs in different ways," Ragnarok explained. "For some, it merely confirms their status and provides a modest enhancement to existing abilities. For others, particularly those with multiple significant bloodlines, it's transformative," McGonagall finished, studying Harry with academic interest. "Your magical signature has visibly changed, Mr. Potter. I suspect you'll find your capabilities substantially altered." Will this help with Voldemort? Harry asked, bringing them back to the practical concern that still loomed over everything else. The threefold power prophecy suggests it will be decisive, Ragnarok replied carefully. Though prophecies are notoriously subject to interpretation. What is certain is that you now have access to magical knowledge and abilities that have been dormant in your bloodlines for generations. As they departed Gringotts, Harry felt a new certainty in his steps. The ritual had done more than enhance his magic, it had given him a sense of connection to a legacy larger than himself, yet uniquely his own. Not a destiny imposed by Dumbledore or Voldemort, but a heritage he could shape according to his own values and choices. What now? Sirius asked as they returned to Grimmauld Place, the night still young despite the momentous events they'd experienced. Now we finish what Dumbledore started, but on our terms, Harry replied. Voldemort is still out there. The Horcruxes need to be found and destroyed. The wizarding world needs to prepare for war. And your place in all of this? McGonagall inquired. You've reclaimed your heritage, exposed Dumbledore's manipulations. You could choose to focus on rebuilding your family legacy, on politics, on any number of paths that don't involve facing Voldemort directly. Harry considered this seriously. The ritual had clarified many things, including his own priorities. I'm going to face him, he said finally. Not because of prophecies or Dumbledore's plans, but because it's the right thing to do. He's threatened everyone and everything I care about, and I now have the power to stop him. Not alone, Sirius insisted. You have allies now, real ones, not people following Dumbledore's instructions about how to handle you. Precisely, McGonagall agreed. And Hogwarts itself will stand with its founder's heir. In the days that followed, Harry's new approach began taking shape. Rather than the secretive, isolated efforts Dumbledore had pursued, Harry established a coordinated campaign against Voldemort. Using information from Dumbledore's debriefings, combined with the political influence of his newly claimed lordships, he created a coalition of ministry officials, order members, and international allies all focused on a single goal, finding and destroying the Horcruxes while preparing for the inevitable confrontation with Voldemort himself. His first appearance before the Wizengamot, claiming all 31 seats that were rightfully his, created a political earthquake. Overnight, the balance of power shifted, with Harry controlling or influencing nearly a quarter of all votes. He used this leverage immediately, pushing through increased funding for the Department of Magical Law Enforcement and establishing a formal alliance with the Goblin Nation for the duration of the conflict. This isn't how Dumbledore would have done it, Amelia Bones observed during a strategy meeting at Grimmauld Place, which had become the new headquarters for their efforts. That's rather the point, Harry replied with a smile. Dumbledore believed in working from the shadows, controlling information, maintaining secrets even from allies. I'm choosing a different path. That path included reaching out to the Weasleys, explaining the situation with the betrothal contract in a way that preserved their dignity while ensuring they understood Dumbledore's manipulation. Arthur and Molly had been horrified to learn the full context of the arrangement they'd signed. We never would have agreed if we'd known he was using your own money for the bride price, Arthur assured Harry, clearly mortified. He presented it as a ministry grant for families who hosted foreign exchange students, said the betrothal was a formality to satisfy some obscure international education requirement. The money had been returned, the contract formally dissolved, and if things were briefly awkward between Harry and Ginny, their friendship ultimately emerged stronger for the honest conversation that followed. Similar clarity marked Harry's approach to the Horcrux hunt. Rather than Dumbledore's solitary research, Harry assembled a team of cursebreakers, including Bill Weasley and specialists from Gringotts, to systematically locate and neutralize each soul container. The locket was found at Grimmauld Place itself, to Sirius's shock. The cup was recovered from the Lestrange vault through legal means, using Harry's distant blood connection to the family to challenge Bellatrix's control of certain heirlooms. Ravenclaw's diadem proved more challenging until Luna Lovegood, brought into their confidence through Ginny, casually mentioned seeing a tiara in a hidden room at Hogwarts, where things are lost. Within weeks, 4 of the known Horcruxes had been destroyed, leaving only Nagini, Voldemort's snake, and the troubling question of Harry's scar. The solution to that final problem came, ironically, from one of Dumbledore's confiscated research journals. A purification ritual, drawing on the combined power of all three founder bloodlines flowing through Harry, could theoretically extract the soul fragment without harm to the host. It's never been attempted, Dumbledore cautioned when consulted on the procedure. The risks are significant. So is living with a piece of Voldemort's soul attached to me, Harry countered. And after the ritual of magical recognition, I have resources he never anticipated. The purification was performed on the summer solstice, drawing on the natural magical energies of the season combined with the founder magics now fully integrated into Harry's core. The process was excruciating but successful, the extracted soul fragment shrieking as it was contained and then destroyed by goblin-forged weapons. When Harry recovered, something fundamental had changed. The constant background pressure he'd never recognized until its absence, like a subtle headache he'd lived with so long he'd forgotten it wasn't normal, was gone. More significantly, the magical capabilities awakened by the ritual of recognition now flowed without the subtle interference the Horcrux had been causing. I can feel the difference, he told Sirius afterward. It's like I've been trying to cast spells through a partially blocked pipe all these years, and suddenly the blockage is gone. This newfound clarity and power proved decisive when Voldemort, realizing his Horcruxes were being systematically destroyed, launched a desperate attack on the Ministry itself. The Battle of the Atrium, as it would later be called, became the stuff of legend, not because of its duration, which was remarkably brief, but because of the display of magical prowess that ended it. Harry, drawing on the combined heritage of Gryffindor, Ravenclaw, and Slytherin, countered Voldemort's decades of dark ritual enhancements with something more fundamental, the pure, undiluted power of bloodlines that traced back to the founders themselves. The duel was spectacular but one-sided, Voldemort's increasingly desperate curses meeting shields and counterspells he couldn't penetrate or understand. "You are nothing," the Dark Lord had screamed in the final moments, his snake-like features contorted with rage and fear. A boy playing with powers beyond his comprehension. "No, Tom," Harry had replied calmly, the founder magics visible as a tricolored aura surrounding him. "I'm exactly what you always wanted to be, the true heir of the founders, accepted by their magic rather than stealing fragments of it through ritual and sacrifice." The final spell wasn't the killing curse or any conventional combat magic. It was an ancient Peverell family spell, designed specifically to address unnatural extensions of life, a spell that recognized and severed Voldemort's tenuous connection to his final Horcrux, Nagini, simultaneously destroying the container and preventing the soul fragment from seeking another host. With that connection broken, Tom Riddle, who had spent decades fragmenting his soul in pursuit of immortality, finally discovered the natural consequence of his actions. Without enough soul remaining to pass on to whatever lay beyond death, but without sufficient anchors to remain in the living world, he simply unraveled. His physical form dissolving not into ash or dust, but into nothingness, the magic that had sustained it dissipating like smoke in a strong wind. The aftermath brought changes that would reshape Wizarding Britain for generations. Harry took his place on the Wisingamot not as a figurehead or political novice, but as a formidable power in his own right, using his influence to push for reforms long overdue, improved relations with magical beings, modernization of outdated laws, and greater transparency in government operations. Hogwarts, too, underwent transformation. With Dumbledore's departure, McGonagall assumed the role of headmistress, implementing educational reforms that incorporated both traditional wizarding knowledge and more progressive approaches. Harry established scholarships for Muggle-born students and those from disadvantaged backgrounds, ensuring that financial constraints would never prevent talented witches and wizards from receiving proper training. As for Dumbledore himself, the legal proceedings concluded with a compromise that reflected the complexity of his actions. Rather than imprisonment, he was sentenced to a form of magical probation, his powers restricted, his movements monitored, but his vast knowledge still accessible to those rebuilding the wizarding world. He retreated to a small cottage in the countryside, occasionally publishing research papers or providing consultation on particularly difficult magical questions, but otherwise removed from the public eye. 6 months after Voldemort's defeat, Harry stood on the grounds of Potter Manor, rebuilt from ruins using his reclaimed fortune and now serving as both his home and the headquarters for various charitable foundations he had established. Beside him stood Sirius, officially cleared of all charges and looking healthier than Harry had ever seen him. "Your parents would be proud," Sirius said, gazing at the manor's elegant facade. "Not just of defeating Voldemort, but of everything else you've accomplished." "I hope so," Harry replied. "I'm trying to build something that honors their sacrifice, something worth the price they paid." "And Dumbledore's grand plan for you?" "The threefold power that could heal or destroy." Harry smiled, looking out over the grounds where dozens of magical children, orphans of the war, Muggleborn struggling with accidental magic, young werewolves learning to manage their condition, played under the watchful eyes of their instructors. "I chose healing," he said simply. "Not because a prophecy dictated it or because Dumbledore engineered it, but because that's who I am. Who I choose to be." The Heir ring gleamed on his finger, 31 bloodlines united in a single emblem, not a burden of expectation or a tool for others' plans, but a foundation upon which he could build his own legacy. One defined not by prophecy or manipulation or the schemes of old men, but by the choices of a young wizard who had finally claimed his birthright and made it truly his own. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.